The first thing Lyra Vale learned about the Dragon Court was that humans were never allowed to look up. Not at the throne, not at the royal banners hanging from the obsidian ceiling, and certainly not at Prince Kyle Draven, the heir to the Ashfire Dominion, and the most feared dragon prince in the southern kingdoms. Humans bowed their heads. Humans stayed silent. Humans survived by pretending not to exist. But on the night of her wedding banquet, every noble in the palace stared directly at her, waiting for her to fail. The great hall blazed with dragonfire lanterns, suspended from iron chains above rivers of molten light, carved into the black marble floor. Crimson banners bearing the Draven crest hung between towering pillars shaped like dragon claws. Music echoed through the chamber, elegant and cold, while nobles dressed in gold and flame-colored silks whispered behind jeweled goblets. At the center of it all stood Lyra, Alone. The silver marriage chains wrapped around her wrists glimmered beneath the firelight, connecting her to the throne beside her like ceremonial shackles. Human bride, political offering, Vartrite, the last surviving daughter of House Vale. The kingdom had burned her family's banners 12 years ago. Now they had dressed her in white and offered her to the monsters who destroyed them. You should be grateful, Lady Seraphine whispered beside her with a smile sharp as broken glass. Most human girls sent to this court do not survive long enough to become brides. Lyra kept her expression still. That was how she survived most things. Stillness, silence, endurance. The noblewoman circled her slowly, pretending to adjust the embroidered sleeves of Lyra's gown, while her claws lightly scraped against her skin beneath the fabric. You're trembling. I'm cold. No, Seraphine murmured softly. You're terrified. The court favorite smiled wider. Seraphine Ashmorn was beautiful in the way venomous things often were. Gold eyes, dark red hair cascading over one shoulder, scales faintly shimmering beneath pale skin near her throat, a mark of strong dragon blood. Everyone expected her to become Kyle's bride someday. Everyone except Kyle himself. That was why she hated Lyra. Not because Lyra was loved, but because she had been chosen instead. The orchestra fell silent. A heavy stillness rolled across the chamber. Then, the Dragon Prince entered. Kyle Draven moved through the hall like a storm wrapped in human skin. Black ceremonial armor clung to his broad frame, embossed with ancient silver runes glowing faintly beneath the firelight. His dark hair fell carelessly over sharp cheekbones, and his eyes, those terrible molten gold dragon eyes, swept across the court with cold indifference. Every noble bowed instantly. Every servant lowered their gaze. Even the air itself seemed to tighten around him. Lyra hated herself for noticing how beautiful he was, and hated herself even more for noticing how exhausted he looked. The prince took his place beside her without speaking. He did not touch her, did not acknowledge her. The silver marriage chain between them glimmered like frost, a political union forged to stop another war between dragons and human territories. Nothing more. Yet the moment Kale stood beside her, whispers erupted through the hall. She looks too fragile. She has no dragon blood. The prince should refuse the union. She'll never survive the mating rites. Lyra forced herself not to react, but Kale heard them. She saw it in the tightening of his jaw. Interesting. Not anger. Not agreement. Something else. Then his gaze shifted toward her hands. Specifically, the scars along her palms. Old burn scars. His expression changed instantly. Only for a second. But she saw it. Recognition. The realization unsettled her deeply. Before she could think further, the high priestess of the Ember Temple rose from her throne near the dais. Priestess Myera wore layered robes, the color of dying embers. Ancient gold markings covered her throat, and hands like cracks spreading through stone. Her eyes lingered on Lyra with undisguised contempt. The union shall now be witnessed by flame, Myera announced. Servants approached carrying ceremonial fire bowls. Lyra's stomach tightened. She knew this tradition. Dragon marriages required both bride and groom to place their hands inside sacred flame. Dragon blood resisted fire, naturally. Human flesh did not. The court knew exactly what was about to happen. Kael turned sharply toward the priestess. The human bride is exempt from the rite. A murmur spread instantly through the hall. Mara smiled thinly. Ancient law does not grant exemptions, Your Highness. She will burn, if she is weak enough to fear sacred flame, Mara replied calmly. Then perhaps the gods themselves reject this union. The trap had been prepared carefully. Refuse the rite, and Lyra would publicly dishonor the crown. Accept it, and she would scream before the entire court. Seraphine looked delighted. Kael's expression darkened dangerously. For one terrible moment, Lyra thought he might actually kill the priestess where she stood. Instead, he looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time all evening. You do not have to do this, he said quietly. His voice startled her. Lower than expected. Rougher. There was no cruelty in it, only warning. The entire court watched her, waiting, judging. Lyra slowly stepped toward the sacred flame. If I refuse now, she said softly, they will never stop seeing me as weak. Kael's eyes narrowed. Then, unexpectedly, something flickered there. Respect. The priestess lifted her hands. Begin. Lyra inhaled once and plunged her scarred hands into the fire. Pain exploded through her instantly. The flames swallowed her skin like living creatures. Gasps echoed through the hall. Someone laughed quietly. Seraphine. Lyra bit down hard enough to taste blood. Do not scream. Do not break. Do not give them what they want. The fire grew hotter. Fahura. Wrong. Something was wrong. The sacred flames suddenly shifted from gold to deep crimson. The temperature in the chamber dropped violently. Every dragon noble stiffened. Kael's head snapped toward the firebowl. The flames twisted unnaturally around Lyra's wrists like serpents. Then the torches lining the hall exploded all at once. Darkness crashed over the banquet chamber. Screams erupted. A freezing wind tore through the palace. And somewhere high above the throne room, something roared. Not a dragon. Something older. Something furious. The entire court froze. Then Lyra looked down in horror. The sacred fire was no longer burning her. It was obeying her, and beneath the skin of her wrists, glowing marks of living flame began spreading slowly up her arms. The high priestess went pale. Kael stepped in front of Lyra instantly, one hand moving toward the sword at his side as nobles panicked around them. Then the palace doors exploded inward. Masked assassins flooded into the royal hall, and every one of them was heading straight for the Dragon Prince. The first assassin reached Kael before the court even understood it was under attack. He came out of the smoke like a shard of night, cloaked in black scale leather, curved blade raised toward the prince's throat. The weapon shimmered with blue venom, the kind distilled from frostworm blood, rare, illegal, and deadly even to dragons. Kael moved faster than human sight. One moment he stood before Lyra. The next, the assassin's wrist snapped backward with a sound like breaking wood. Kael drove him into the marble floor hard enough to crack it, then tore the blade from his hand and hurled it through the throat of another masked attacker crossing the dais. The court screamed. Nobles scattered. Servants dove beneath tables. Golden plates overturned. Wine spilled like blood across the white stone. Fire lanterns swung violently overhead as more assassins poured into the chamber from every side entrance. Lyra stumbled backward, hands still burning with that impossible crimson light. She expected the flames to fade. They did not. They crawled beneath her skin like something waking from a long sleep. Kael seized her wrist. The moment his fingers touched her, the glow surged. A violent pulse of heat blasted outward. Every window in the hall shattered. Kael released her instantly, breathing hard. Not from pain, from recognition. "What are you?" he whispered. The question cut deeper than any insult the court had thrown at her. Lyra pulled her hand to her chest. "I don't know." And that was the truth. A terrible truth. She had spent her entire life being told what she was. Human, fragile, political debt, last remnant of a fallen house that should have vanished quietly. But no one had ever told her why her palms burned in sleep, why fire bent toward her in secret, why dragons stared at her too long before looking away. Another assassin lunged for her. Kale shoved her behind him and met the blade with his bare hand. The poisoned edge sliced across his palm. Black veins spread instantly beneath his skin. Kael's face hardened. He did not cry out, but Lyra saw his knees almost buckle. "Prince Kale!" Seraphine screamed from across the hall, though she made no move to help him. The High Priestess Mara stood near the temple dais, guarded by Ember Knights, her eyes locked not on the assassins, but on Lyra's glowing arms. Fear flickered there. Not surprise. Fear, Lyra noticed. And because she noticed, Mara noticed her noticing. The priestess lifted one hand. Asile comment. 3 assassins turned toward Lyra, not toward Kale. Toward her. A cold realization slid through Lyra's chest. This attack was not only meant to kill the prince, it was meant to reveal her, or remove her. Kael drew his sword with his poisoned hand and cut down the first attacker. The second ducked beneath his strike, moving toward Lyra with a hooked blade. Lyra backed into the overturned banquet table. No weapon, no training, no allies. Only fire beneath her skin and terror in her throat. The assassin raised his blade. Then, a low growl rolled through the shattered hall. Every dragon-blooded noble froze. The sound had not come from any man. It came from Kael. For one brief heartbeat, his shadow changed against the wall. Too large, too horned, too monstrous. Not the elegant dragon form sung about in court poetry, but something jagged and wrong, with torn wings and a crown of black flame. The assassin faltered. Kael killed him before he could recover. But Lyra had seen it. So had Maera. Kael turned away quickly, jaw clenched, as if fighting something inside his own body. The poison was spreading. His gold eyes flickered black. Lyra remembered the old stories whispered by human prisoners in the border. Keeps the Draven heir was cursed, they said. His dragon was dying. Or worse, changing. The court hid it behind ceremony and conquest, but the Ashfire bloodline was rotting from within. She had never known whether to believe it. Now she did. Kael staggered. For the first time, the feared dragon prince looked mortal. An assassin climbed onto the dais behind him, blade aimed for his spine. No one moved. Not Seraphine. Not the priestess. Not the court that claimed to worship him. Lyra moved. She did not think. She simply ran. The silver marriage chain snapped tight between her wrist and Kael's, dragging against the floor as she threw herself between the prince and the blade. The assassin's weapon struck her shoulder instead. Pain tore through her. But before the blade could sink deeper, the crimson fire beneath her skin erupted. Not outward. Upward. Through her back. Lyra screamed. The sound cracked through the hall like a bell breaking. Heat burst from her spine. Bone, flame, memory, and agony tore open inside her body. The white wedding gown split down the back as 2 burning shapes forced themselves free. Not feathers, not flesh, but wings made of ancient dragon fire, vast and luminous, edged in gold and crimson. The entire royal banquet fell silent. Even the assassins stopped. Lyra collapsed to her knees, sobbing through clenched teeth, hands clawing at the marble as the wings unfurled behind her. They were enormous, beautiful, terrible, and impossible. A human girl did not grow dragon wings. A human bride did not carry sacred fire. A daughter of House Vale did not bear the mark of the extinct Skyfire clan. Unless House Vale had never been merely human, Kael stared at her like his world had broken open. His face had gone pale beneath the poison spreading through his veins. No, he breathed. It was not disbelief. It was grief. Lyra lifted her tear-filled eyes to him. "You knew?" she whispered. His silence answered before his mouth did. Across the hall, the High Priestess Maera pointed at Lyra with trembling rage. Abomination. The word echoed through the chamber. Then, louder. Abomination. The court recoiled. Some nobles fell to their knees. Others drew blades. Seraphine stared as if Lyra had stolen not only her marriage, but the future she had spent years building. Mara's voice rose with holy authority. The Skyfire bloodline was extinguished by royal decree. Its magic is forbidden under temple law. That creature is not a bride. She is a weapon hidden in human skin. Lyra tried to stand, but the wings dragged behind her, heavy with flame and pain. Kael stepped toward her. The priestess snapped. "Touch her, and you condemn your throne." The warning froze the entire court. Kael's father, the dying Dragon King, had not appeared in public for months. The council already whispered that Kael's curse made him unfit. His claim was fragile, his enemies hungry. If he protected Lyra now, he would give them the excuse they needed. If he condemned her, he would save his crown. Lyra saw the choice forming before him. And worse, she saw how much it cost him. His poisoned hand shook at his side. His dragon shadow writhed behind him like a beast, begging to be released. "Kael," Seraphine pleaded, stepping forward at last. Her voice was soft, careful, perfectly timed. "For the kingdom, step away from her." Lyra lowered her head. There it was. The moment she had always known would come. She had been useful as a treaty, tolerated as a bride, pitied as a fragile human. But now that she was dangerous, they would make her a monster. Kael looked at the court, then at Myra, then at Laura. His eyes burned gold again. "She saved my life." Mara's mouth tightened. Forbidden blood cannot be excused by one useful act. "She saved my life," Kael repeated, darker this time, "while every loyal noble in this hall watched me die." A ripple of shame moved through the room. Seraphine's face hardened. Myra lifted both hands, and the Ember Knights surrounding her drew their ceremonial spears. "Then the temple invokes sacred custody," the priestess declared. "The bride will be taken below for purification. If she survives judgment, the gods may decide her fate." Lyra knew enough to understand what that meant. A trial beneath the Ember Temple. A locked chamber. No witnesses. No return. Kael took one step in front of her. The marriage chain between them lifted from the floor, glowing faintly in the heat of her wings. "You will not take her." Mara's eyes narrowed. "You would start a civil war for a girl you rejected 1 hour ago?" The words struck hard. Because they were true. Kael had stood beside Lyra like she was a burden, had watched the court measure her weakness, had refused the warmth expected of a husband, even a political one. But now his body stood between her and death. Not lovingly, not softly, like a wall of black iron. Lyra did not understand him, and that frightened her more than hatred would have. The poison finally reached Kael's throat. He coughed once, blood darkening his lips. Lyra's wings flared instinctively. Every flame in the hall bent toward him. The silver marriage chain between them burned red. Kael dropped to one knee. The court gasped. Seraphine moved toward him. Lyra reached him first. She caught his face in her trembling hands, forgetting the court, forgetting the priestess, forgetting the wings burning from her back. The moment her scarred palms touched his skin, the black veins beneath Kael's throat stopped spreading. Then they began to recede, slowly, painfully, as if her fire was burning the poison out of him. Kael stared up at her. This close, his guarded mask fractured, and beneath it, Lyra saw not a prince, not a monster, a boy who had been carrying death inside his blood for years. "You're healing me," he whispered. Lyra shook her head, terrified. "I don't know how." Mara's expression changed again. This time, the fear was absolute. "Seize her now," the priestess ordered. The Ember Knights advanced. Lyra's wings flared, not by command, by instinct. Flames swept across the floor in a perfect circle around her and Kael, stopping inches from the knight's boots. No one crossed it, not even the priestess. Above them, beyond the shattered windows, the storm clouds split open. A red star burned in the night sky. Kael looked up. So did every dragon in the room. The ancient prophecy was no longer whispering from forgotten scrolls. It was standing in the banquet hall with blood on her wedding gown and fire on her back, and every dragon in the palace knew what it meant. The Skyfire Queen had returned. No one moved. The flames surrounding Lyra and Kael hissed across the marble floor like living creatures, casting violent crimson light across the ruined banquet hall. Outside the shattered palace windows, thunder rolled over the mountain kingdom, but even the storm seemed distant beneath the suffocating silence now gripping the court. The Skyfire Queen. The words spread through the chamber without anyone daring to say them aloud again. Ancient fear had entered the room. Lyra could feel it pressing against her skin harder than the heat of the flames themselves. The Ember Knights no longer looked eager to seize her. Their spear points trembled faintly as they watched the fire wings towering behind her. Several nobles had already backed toward the exits. Others stared at her with naked horror, as though one wrong breath might awaken something catastrophic. Only Priestess Mara remained perfectly still. Too still. That frightened Lyra more than panic would have. Kael slowly rose to his feet beside her. The poison veins along his throat had faded, though not completely. Dark fractures still pulsed beneath his skin like cracks beneath ice. His eyes stayed fixed on Lyra, not on her wings, on her face, as if he were searching for someone he had lost long ago. Then his expression hardened again. The prince turned toward the court. "The banquet is over," he said coldly. "Anyone who values their life will leave this hall immediately." The command shattered the paralysis, gripping the nobles. The court erupted into chaos. Silk swept across blood-stained marble as lords and ladies rushed for the exits. Servants stumbled over overturned tables. Guards shouted over one another while dragging wounded nobles from the hall. Somewhere near the eastern pillars, a dying assassin coughed blood across the floor. But through all the panic, Lyra noticed one thing. No one dared come near her, not even by accident. Her chest tightened painfully. Moments ago, they had mocked her for weakness. Now they looked at her like she was a disaster waiting to happen. Different fear. Same loneliness. Kael must have seen it flicker across her face because his jaw tightened again. "Come with me," he said quietly. Before Lyra could answer, Mara's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. "You cannot hide her now." The priestess descended the temple steps slowly, ember-colored robes whispering across the floor. Behind her, sacred runes burned faintly along the black stone walls. "She carries forbidden blood," Mara continued. "The old laws demand execution." Kael's expression turned glacial. "The old laws also forbid assassins from entering the royal court. You speak as though this attack was my doing. You knew they were coming. Not a question." The hall fell silent again. Mara smiled faintly. "Careful, Your Highness." Kael took a step toward her. Instantly, every Ember Knight lowered their spears. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Lyra felt it then. Not political tension, predatory tension. The Dragon Prince and the High Priestess were not merely rivals. They hated each other. Deeply. Personally. "You've waited years for an excuse to remove me," Kael said softly. "Now you think she has given you one." Mara's eyes flicked briefly toward Lyra's wings. "No," the priestess replied. "I think she has given the kingdom proof." "Proof of what?" Lyra wanted to ask. But something in Mara's face made dread curl inside her stomach before the answer even came. "The Skyfire bloodline nearly destroyed this kingdom once already," the priestess said. "The last Skyfire Queen drowned entire cities in dragonfire when the royal family tried to chain her." Whispers spread among the remaining nobles. Lyra's pulse hammered painfully. She had never heard this story before. House Vale had spoken little of the past. After her parents died, most family records disappeared mysteriously. Servants avoided her questions. Tutors changed subjects whenever ancient dragon clans were mentioned. Now, she understood why. History had not forgotten the Skyfires. History had buried them. Kael's voice lowered dangerously. That history was erased by the temple. It was erased because dragons still remember the screams. Mara's gaze shifted toward Lyra again. "And now, her blood awakens." The priestess lifted one hand slowly. The sacred flames burning around Lyra reacted instantly. They rose higher, pulled toward Mara, like tides, answering the moon. Lyra gasped as pain tore through her spine again. The fire wings flickered violently behind her, unstable now, almost transparent. Myra's expression sharpened. Interesting. She's losing control. The realization flashed through Lyra too late. The flames around her surged, suddenly outward. A nearby pillar exploded. Nobles screamed. Lyra stumbled backward in horror. I didn't mean. Another pulse of fire burst from her wings, melting part of the marble floor. Panic swept the hall again. Container, someone shouted. Kyle moved instantly. He grabbed Lyra's wrists. Look at me. The command cut through the chaos, sharply enough that she obeyed without thinking. His gold eyes locked onto hers. Breathe. The fire continued raging behind her. I can't stop it. Yes, you can. You don't understand. I understand more than you think. His voice dropped lower, more dangerous, more intimate. Listen to me carefully, Lyra. The fire answers emotion. Fear feeds it. Panic feeds it. If you lose control now, Mara wins. Hearing her name from his mouth startled her more than it should have. Not human bride. Not treaty. Lyra. Something softened briefly inside his expression. Then he placed one scarred hand against the center of her chest. The contact stole her breath. Warmth spread through her body instantly. Not violent like the fire, but grounding. Ancient. Familiar in a way she could not explain. The flames behind her steadied. The entire hall noticed. So did Myra. And the priestess suddenly looked very, very concerned. Kale leaned closer. Good, he murmured. That's it. Lyra realized then that the prince was shaking slightly. Not from fear, from strain. His dragon curse was still fighting beneath his skin. And somehow, touching her seemed to ease it. The silver chain between their wrists glowed brighter. A mate bond? No, impossible. Dragons did not bond with humans. Yet the chain pulsed like a living heartbeat between them. Myra saw it too. The priestess' composure cracked for the first time. No, she whispered. Kale's eyes flicked toward her instantly. And suddenly Lyra understood. The prince had not merely recognized her scars earlier. He had known exactly what she was, for much longer than tonight. Before she could force the truth from him, the great doors behind the throne burst open again. But this time, no assassins entered. An old man did. The Dragon King. Every noble immediately dropped to one knee. Even the Ember Knights lowered their weapons. King Valor Draven had once been the most feared dragon ruler in the Western Kingdoms. Now he looked carved from sickness and shadow. His silver-black robes hung heavily from his thin frame, and faint scales crept across the left side of his face like spreading stone. Dragon sickness. The royal curse. Lyra realized with horror that Kale's condition was not unique. It was hereditary. The king's pale gold eyes swept across the ruined banquet hall. The blood, the fire, the wings, then finally settled on Lyra. And unlike the others, he did not look shocked. He looked devastated. So, the king said quietly, voice rough with age, the prophecy was true. Kyle stepped protectively in front of Lyra. His father noticed immediately. A strange sadness crossed the king's face. You hid her too long, Valor said softly. Lyra's heart stopped. Kyle said nothing. The king continued approaching slowly, leaning slightly on a black iron cane shaped like a dragon's spine. Every step echoed through the ruined hall. I warned you this day would come. And I warned you what the temple would do if they found her, Kyle replied coldly. Lyra stared at him. Found her, not discovered. Found, as though she had been hunted long before tonight. The king stopped, several feet away. His ancient eyes met Lyra's. You have your mother's wings. The words struck like lightning. Lyra felt the floor tilt beneath her. My mother? Queen Illyria Skyfire. The name meant nothing to the court, but it shattered something inside Priestess Mara. No, the priestess hissed. That's impossible. Illyria died before the purge. Valor's expression darkened. The temple believed she died. A terrible silence followed. Lyra's thoughts spun violently. Her mother had died when she was 6. Human, weak, gentle, or so she had believed. Kyle looked away briefly. Guilt. The sight of it chilled her. "You knew," she whispered again. This time he answered. Yes. The truth hit harder than betrayal should have, because suddenly, every strange moment in her life made horrifying sense. The missing records, the whispers, the way dragons stared at her, the political marriage. She had not been chosen randomly. She had been delivered directly into the dragon court, like someone placing a hidden torch beside dry wood. "Why?" she demanded quietly. Kyle held her Kase. "Because if the temple found you first," he said, "they would have killed you as a child." Lyra felt her throat tighten painfully. "And you thought marrying me was better?" "No," he admitted. "I thought it was the only way to keep you where I could protect you." The honesty of it stunned her silent. Not kindness, not affection. Duty. Years of it. Before either of them could speak again, Mara raised her voice sharply. "The court deserves the full truth." The priestess turned toward the remaining nobles. The Skyfire bloodline does not merely command dragonfire. Their queens can dominate dragons themselves. Fear spread instantly. Several nobles looked toward Kale, toward the king, toward Lyra, and suddenly, the political danger became obvious. If Lyra truly carried Skyfire blood, she could become more powerful than the throne itself. Mara smiled faintly. There it is. The real fear. Not magic. Power. The priestess stepped closer to the center of the hall. "Your Majesty," she said smoothly to King Valor. "If the girl remains alive, civil war will follow. The noble houses will never kneel to a Skyfire queen." The old king looked tired suddenly. Very tired. But before he could answer, a scream echoed from outside the palace walls. Then another. Then the sound of massive wings beating against the storm-dark sky. Every dragon in the hall went still. Kyle's expression changed instantly. Fear. Real fear. He turned toward the shattered windows. Far beyond the palace towers, something enormous moved through the clouds. Something ancient. Something burning. And somewhere in the darkness, beyond the mountain kingdom, a dragon answered Lyra's fire with a roar powerful enough to shake the entire palace. The roar did not sound like any dragon Lyra had ever heard in stories. It was too deep, too vast. The sound rolled through the mountains like something awakening beneath the bones of the world itself. The palace trembled violently as storm clouds twisted above the capital, lit from within by veins of crimson lightning. Outside the shattered windows, dragons began screaming. Not battle cries. Fear. Every noble near the balconies stumbled backward at once. Several dragon guards rushed toward the outer terraces to look into the sky, only to freeze in horror seconds later. One of them whispered a prayer. Another dropped his spear entirely. Kyle moved first. "Seal the western gates," he ordered sharply. Now, no one obeyed immediately, because no one could stop staring at the sky. Then the creature emerged from the storm clouds. Massive black wings tore through the lightning above the capital city. Ancient scales shimmered dark red beneath the rain, scarred by centuries of battle. Fire poured from between jagged teeth bright enough to illuminate the palace towers below. An enormous dragon circled the mountain kingdom once, and every dragon in the royal hall bowed their heads instinctively. Even King Valor. Lyra's breath caught painfully, not because the creature was terrifying, because she somehow knew it. Not its name, not its face, but something older, something buried inside her blood. The dragon roared again. This time, her fire wings answered. Heat exploded through Lyra's body so violently she nearly collapsed. Kyle caught her instantly. The moment his hands touched her waist, the dragon above the palace shifted direction sharply. Toward them. The high priestess went pale. "No," Mara whispered. "It cannot have sensed her already." Kale looked furious suddenly. "What did you do?" The priestess ignored him. The ancient dragon descended lower through the storm, enormous wings blotting out moonlight as panic erupted across the capital below. Bells rang from the watchtowers. Soldiers flooded the palace bridges. Civilians screamed through the streets. Yet the dragon did not attack. It circled, searching, hunting. Fahia. Lyra's knees weakened beneath the crushing heat building inside her chest. She pressed trembling fingers against her throat. Something was burning beneath her skin. Emak. Kael saw her wince and grabbed her wrist gently. "Show me." Lyra hesitated, then slowly pulled aside the collar of her gown. A glowing crimson symbol spread beneath her collarbone, an ancient circular mark shaped like dragon wings surrounding a crown of fire. The moment Kael saw it, all color drained from his face. "The bond seal," he said quietly. King Valor closed his eyes briefly, like a man watching a nightmare become real. Mira looked almost triumphant now. The beast has found its queen. Lyra stared at them in confusion. What beast? No one answered immediately, which terrified her more. Outside, the giant dragon slammed onto one of the outer palace towers hard enough to crack stone. Soldiers scattered in panic as molten fire poured from its jaws across the battlements. Yet still, it did not kill anyone. It kept looking toward the throne hall, toward Lyra. Kael swore under his breath. Then, he turned toward her fully. "You need to leave the palace." Lyra blinked. "What?" "Now. You still haven't explained what that thing is." Kael's jaw tightened. "Because there isn't time." The dragon roared again. Closer. The stained glass ceiling above the banquet hall shattered inward instantly. The court screamed as burning fragments rained across the chamber. A gigantic claw crashed through the ceiling. Black scales. Golden fia. Ancient chains still wrapped around parts of its leg, broken and rusted from age. The dragon had once been imprisoned, and now it was free. The beast lowered its massive head into the throne hall. Every Ember Knight dropped their weapons immediately. Several nobles fainted outright. Lyra could not move. The creature's eyes found her instantly. Bright gold. Not wild. Not mindless. Lonely. The realization struck her so suddenly, it hurt. This dragon was not hunting her. It had been searching for her. The giant beast inhaled once, and bowed. The entire royal court watched in horror as one of the oldest living dragons in existence lowered its head before a human girl. "No," Seraphine whispered. The world shifted in that moment. Lyra felt it. The court felt it. Even the throne itself seemed smaller suddenly. Because dragons did not bow. Not to kings. Not to armies. And certainly not to humans. Kael stepped protectively in front of Lyra anyway. The dragon growled instantly. A warning. Kael did not retreat. The creature's enormous eyes narrowed. And then, horrifyingly, Kael's own dragon answered from inside him. Lyra heard it. A monstrous growl vibrating beneath his skin. The prince staggered slightly as black scales crawled briefly along his throat and jawline before vanishing again. The curse. The beast inside him was waking too. The ancient dragon leaned closer. Its gaze shifted between Kael and Lyra, then toward the glowing marriage chain between their wrists. Understanding flickered inside those burning eyes. The beast rumbled low in its throat. Approval. Lyra's pulse studere. Impossible. Kael looked equally disturbed. Myra suddenly shouted over the chaos. "Kill it now." No one moved. Not one soldier. Not one dragon knight. Because everyone in the hall understood the same terrible truth. They could not kill this creature. The dragon slowly turned its head toward the high priestess, and hatred filled its eyes instantly. Pure, ancient hatred. Mira stepped backward for the first time all night. Interesting. The beast knew her, or knew what she represented. King Valor's expression darkened with realization. "The temple lied," he murmured. The priestess spun toward him sharply. "Your Majesty, you told the kingdoms the Skyfire dragons died during the rebellion." The king continued slowly. "But this creature was chained beneath the Ember Temple." Silence crashed through the throne room. Lyra stared at Myra, The ancient chains wrapped around the dragon's limbs suddenly made horrifying sense. The temple had imprisoned it. For centuries, the dragon lowered its massive head toward Lyra again, slowly, carefully, like approaching something fragile. Then, its enormous snout brushed lightly against her fire wings. The moment it touched her, memories exploded through Lyra's mind. Fire, screaming, a woman with crimson wings, standing atop burning towers, temple soldiers dragging chained dragons beneath the mountains, a child hidden inside human lands, while her mother bled across black stone floors. And one final memory, Prince Kael, as a boy, younger, softer, standing beside a hidden carriage in the snow, watching silently as Lyra, small, frightened, barely 6 years old, was taken away from the Dragon Kingdom forever. "You promised," the child Kael whispered to someone unseen. "You promised she would live." The memory shattered instantly. Lyra gasped and stumbled backward. Kael caught her before she fell. She stared at him in horror. "You knew me." "Not suspicion now. Truth." Kael said nothing, but guilt flooded his face so clearly she almost wished he had lied. "You were there," she whispered. The prince closed his eyes briefly. Yes. Pain twisted through Lyra's chest harder than the fire ever had. All this time, all those years alone, and he had known. The dragon above them growled softly again, sensing her distress. Then suddenly, an arrow pierced its neck. The hall erupted. The ancient dragon roared in agony as black poison spread instantly beneath its scales. Nobles screamed and scattered, while the beast slammed violently against the palace walls. Kael spun toward the eastern balcony. A royal commander stood there with archers behind him. Commander Thorn, captain of the palace guard, and judging by the cold satisfaction in his expression, the attack had been planned. "Kill the beast," Thorn shouted, "before it destroys the kingdom." Dozens of poisoned arrows flew through the air. The dragon roared furiously. Its fire blasted across the ceiling. Stone exploded. The palace began collapsing. Kael drew his sword instantly. "You fool," he snarled, but it was too late. The poisoned dragon snapped in agony, wings smashing through pillars as panic consumed the throne hall entirely. Soldiers ran. Nobles trampled one another toward the exits. Fire spread rapidly through the shattered ceiling above. And through the chaos, Lyra noticed something horrifying. The poisoned arrows. The same black venom used by the assassins earlier. Commander Thorn had been involved from the beginning. The realization hit Kael at the exact same moment. Their eyes met. Betrayal. Real betrayal. Then the wounded dragon turned toward the hall in blind agony and opened its jaws, directly toward the fleeing court. The fire came like the end of the world. A river of molten gold exploded from the ancient dragon's jaws, surging toward the throne hall with enough force to melt stone. Nobles screamed and scattered across the collapsing chamber as heat swallowed the air itself. Kael moved instantly. He grabbed Lyra around the waist and threw both of them behind the shattered throne, just as dragonfire tore across the room. The impact shook the palace. Columns exploded. Royal banners ignited in violent crimson flame. The marble floor cracked beneath them like splitting ice. Lyra covered her head as burning debris rained across the chamber, her fire wings instinctively wrapping around both herself and Kael. Heat rolled over them in waves powerful enough to suffocate, but the flames did not touch her. And strangely, they did not touch Kael either. The dragonfire curved around them, protecting them. Kael realized it at the same time she did. His eyes lifted slowly toward her wings surrounding them like a shield. The prince looked shaken in a way Lyra had not yet seen. Not by the destruction, by her. Outside their shield of fire, the throne hall descended into madness. Commander Thorn shouted orders through the smoke while archers continued firing poisoned arrows into the dragon's scales. Ember knights clashed with panicked guards. Burning chandeliers crashed from the ceiling, crushing fleeing nobles beneath molten iron and shattered crystal. And through it all, Priestess Mara watched. Calm. Controlled. Waiting. Lyra saw it instantly. This chaos was not failure. It was opportunity. The priestess wanted the dragon enraged. Wanted the court terrified. Wanted everyone in the kingdom to associate destruction with the return of Skyfire blood. Kale, Lyra whispered urgently. She planned this. I know. His voice sounded murderous. The dragon above them roared again, thrashing against the palace towers as more poisoned arrows buried themselves into its flesh. Black veins spread beneath ancient scales. Its movements became increasingly unstable. Dying. They were killing it. And somehow, Lyra could feel its pain inside her own chest. The bond mark beneath her collarbone burned hotter. A strange pull dragged at her heartbeat, as though the creature was calling to her. Kale noticed her expression instantly. No. Lyra looked at him. You know what I'm about to say? I know exactly what you're thinking. His jaw tightened. And the answer is no. It's dying. It's dangerous. It's in pain. It could kill everyone in this palace. Lyra stared at him. For a moment, the prince's control cracked completely. Fear flooded his face. Not fear of the dragon. Fear for her. The realization hit harder than it should have. You don't understand, Kale said quietly. If you bond yourself to that creature now, the council will never let you live. A bitter laugh almost escaped her. They already want me dead. Another violent tremor shook the palace. The dragon screamed again. Not rage this time. Ogony. Lyra flinched instinctively. Then she saw something through the smoke beyond the throne. A child. One of the servant boys frozen near the western archway, trapped beneath a fallen beam while fire spread rapidly around him. No one else noticed. Everyone was too busy running. The boy screamed as flames closed in. Lyra moved before Kale could stop her. Lyra. She tore free from behind the throne and sprinted across the collapsing hall. Heat slammed into her instantly. Burning debris crashed around her as nobles shoved past without even seeing the trapped child. The servant boy couldn't have been older than 10. Terrified eyes locked onto hers through smoke and fire. Please, he sobbed. Lyra dropped beside the fallen beam and shoved against it with all her strength. It barely moved. The ceiling groaned overhead. Another tremor. Kale reached her seconds later, black fury radiating from him. This palace is falling apart. There's a child. I can see that. Together they lifted the beam enough for the boy to crawl free. The servant stumbled away crying, disappearing into the smoke toward the exits. Kyle grabbed Lyra's wrist immediately afterward. You could have died. The anger in his voice startled her. Not cold anger. Raw anger. Personal. Lyra stared at him through drifting ash. You came after me. Kyle froze, as though he had not meant to make it obvious. Then another poisoned arrow slammed into the dragon above them. The beast roared so violently the remaining stained glass ceiling shattered entirely. Moonlight poured into the throne hall, and beneath that silver light, Kale's curse finally began to break loose. Black scales spread rapidly across the side of his throat. His pupils sharpened into slitted gold. A growl escaped him. Not human anymore. Lyra stepped back instinctively. Pain crossed his face instantly. Not from the transformation. From seeing her afraid of him. The prince turned away sharply. You need to leave, he said hoarsely. What's happening to you? My dragon's losing control. The confession sounded ripped out of him. Kale pressed one shaking hand against the nearest pillar hard enough to crack stone. For the first time since entering the palace, the dragon prince looked genuinely terrified. Lyra remembered the monstrous shadow she had seen earlier. The thing hiding beneath his skin. What is your curse? She asked softly. Kyle laughed bitterly. A death sentence. Another growl tore from his throat. Lower this time. Hungria. He closed his eyes tightly as dark heat rolled off his body. The royal bloodline is poisoned, he admitted quietly. Every heir born from House Draven eventually loses control of their dragon form. Lyra's stomach twisted. That's why your father is dying. Kale nodded once. The dragon madness worsens with every generation. his breathing roughened. Eventually, the beast consumes what's left of the man. Outside, lightning illuminated the burning city beyond the palace walls. Screams echoed from below. The kingdom itself was beginning to panic. KL looked toward the wounded ancient dragon still thrashing against the towers. "Mira knows my control is weakening," he said darkly. "That's why she arranged tonight." Lyra stared at him. The political marriage, the assassins, the poisoned arrows, the public reveal. Everything had been carefully designed, not merely to expose Lyra, but to destroy Kale too. If the prince lost control publicly, the council would remove him from succession instantly. And if Lyra's forbidden blood awakened at the same time, the temple would gain absolute power. "They want civil war," Lyra whispered. Kyle's expression darkened. "They want fear." A sudden scream echoed from the upper balconies. "Seraphine." Both of them looked up instantly. The noblewoman clung desperately to a collapsing stairway as fire consumed the western gallery around her. Several nobles had already abandoned her in panic. The stone beneath her feet cracked violently. She was about to fall. Lyra moved instinctively. Kale caught her arm immediately. "She tried to ruin you. She's still going to die." The prince stared at her. Something conflicted flickered behind his eyes again. Then he released her silently. Lyra spread her unstable fire wings and leapt. The motion felt unnatural and terrifying. Heat exploded beneath her as flames carried her upward through smoke-filled air. For one horrible second, she thought she would fall. Then the wings caught the storm wind, and suddenly she was flying. The realization nearly shattered her concentration. Lyra crashed awkwardly onto the burning balcony beside Seraphine, stumbling hard against broken stone. The noblewoman stared at her in disbelief. "You came back for me?" Lyra ignored the question and grabbed her arm, just as the staircase collapsed entirely beneath them. Seraphine screamed. Lyra launched them both into the air. The flight was clumsy, painful, barely controlled, but enough. They landed hard near the lower dais beside Kale. Seraphine immediately shoved away from Lyra, as though burned. Yet her gold eyes looked shaken now, confused, ashamed. Why would the girl she hated save her? Before anyone could speak, Commander Thorne strode through the smoke toward the center of the throne hall, with armed guards surrounding him. And behind him, more temple soldiers entered the palace. Far too many. This had never been merely an assassination attempt. It was a coup. Thorne pointed directly at Lyra. "In the name of the Ember Temple, seize the Skyfire Witch." Guards advanced instantly. Kyle stepped in front of Lyra, sword drawn. The hall went still again, because everyone understood what would happen next. If the prince protected her openly now, there would be no return, no political compromise, no saving his claim. Kale knew it too. Lyra saw the war happening behind his eyes. Duty, kingdom, throne, or her. Then Commander Thorne smiled coldly. "You hesitate because you know what she is," he said loudly enough for the remaining court to hear. "The prophecy was true. Your true mate will destroy the Ashfire throne." Silence crashed through the burning hall. Lyra felt Kale go completely still beside her. "Mate." The word echoed painfully through her chest. No one had spoken it aloud before, but now the truth stood naked between them. The glowing chain, the fire bond, his healing, her wings awakening beside him. Every dragon in the room understood. Kyle's true mate was not a noble dragon bride, not Seraphine, not any pure-blood princess. It was the human girl carrying forbidden Skyfire blood. Commander Thorne lifted his sword. "Kill them both." The guards charged, and Kyle's control finally broke. Black fire exploded through the throne hall. The explosion of black fire tore through the throne hall like a living nightmare. Guards were thrown backward instantly as darkness and flame erupted around Kale in a violent shockwave. Marble shattered beneath his feet. The burning banners overhead disintegrated into ash before they even touched the ground. Then the Dragon Prince screamed, not like a man, like something ancient and starving finally breaking free of its cage. Lyra stumbled backward as Kale dropped to one knee, clutching his chest. Black scales spread rapidly across his skin now, crawling over his throat, jaw, and arms like living armor. His gold eyes darkened into something molten and monstrous. The court recoiled in horror, because this was no elegant royal dragon transformation. This was corruption, the curse, consuming him in real time. Another wave of black fire burst outward. Temple soldiers screamed as the flames devoured their weapons whole. Several collapsed instantly, writhing across the floor as the cursed fire spread through armor and flesh alike. Commander Thorne backed away for the first time. "What is he doing?" one noble whispered in terror. King Valor answered softly from the smoke behind them. "Dying." Kale's body shook violently. Fragments of dragon bone began pushing beneath his skin. Jagged black horns slowly curved upward from his temples while shadow-like wings flickered behind him, unstable and broken. Lyra's chest tightened painfully. He had been hiding this alone. Every day, every court gathering, every battle, every cold expression and carefully controlled movement suddenly made horrifying sense. The prince was not emotionally distant because he lacked feeling. He was terrified of losing himself. Kale lifted his head slowly, and when his gaze found Lyra, the beast inside him calmed. Only slightly, but enough. The black flames surrounding him stopped spreading. The entire throne hall noticed. So did Myra. The high priestess's face went pale beneath the firelight. "No," she whispered. Lyra realized the truth instantly. She was not the kingdom's destruction. She was the only thing keeping Kale alive. Commander Thorne apparently realized it too. "Separate them," he shouted immediately. Temple soldiers rushed forward again. Gael Rose. The movement alone silenced the hall. He no longer looked entirely human. Black scales covered half his face now. Smoke curled from between sharpened teeth. The shadows behind him moved unnaturally, like massive wings trying to tear themselves fully into existence. And yet his eyes never left Lyra. "Stay behind me," he growled. The sound vibrated through the hall like distant thunder. Lyra should have been afraid. Instead, something inside her ached for him, because beneath the monster everyone feared, she could still see the man fighting desperately not to become one. The first soldier lunged. Kyle tore through him instantly, not with elegance, with brutality. Black dragonfire erupted from his claws as he ripped the spear apart and slammed the soldier into a pillar hard enough to crater stone. More guards charged. Kale met them head-on. The throne hall descended into violence again. Temple soldiers burned. Dragon guards turned on one another in confusion. Some defended the prince. Others obeyed the temple. The kingdom was splitting apart in real time. Lyra's fire wings flared instinctively as chaos swallowed the palace. And then, a blade pressed against her throat. "Do not move." Seraphine. Lyra Froze. The noblewoman stood behind her, trembling slightly, as she held a jeweled dagger against Lyra's neck. Tears glimmered in her gold eyes, not from fear, from heartbreak. The realization struck Lyra unexpectedly hard. Seraphine had loved Kale, truly loved him, perhaps selfishly, perhaps possessively, but not falsely. And now she was watching the man she wanted risk everything for another woman. "You should have died quietly," Seraphine whispered shakily. "Then none of this would have happened." Lyra did not struggle, not because she feared the dagger, because she saw how broken Seraphine looked. "I didn't ask for this," Lyra said softly. "That makes it worse." Across the hall, Kale noticed instantly. Everything stopped. The black flames around him surged violently. "Seraphine," he said. Her breath caught. Lyra heard it clearly. Even now, hearing his voice say her name still mattered to her. "Don't," Kale warned. The shadows behind him twisted into enormous half-formed wings. The monster inside him wanted blood. And suddenly everyone in the throne room realized the terrifying truth. If Seraphine hurt Lyra, Kale would kill her. Not politically destroy her. Not imprison her. Kill her. Seraphine realized it too. Pain crossed her face like a blade. "You never looked at me that way," she whispered. Kale said nothing. because denying it would have been crueler. A tear slid down Seraphine's cheek. Then slowly, her dagger lowered, not out of surrender, out of understanding. She had already lost. Commander Thorne snarled in fury. Coward. He ripped a crossbow from a fallen guard and aimed directly at Lyra. Kyle moved instantly. Too late. The poisoned bolt flew across the hall. Lyra saw it coming, saw death spinning toward her chest. Then Seraphine stepped in front of her. The bolt pierced straight through the noblewoman's heart. Silence crashed through the throne hall. Seraphine staggered once. Blood bloomed across her crimson gown. Lyra caught her before she hit the floor. No. Seraphine looked up weakly. Not at Lyra. At Cal. The dragon prince stood frozen several feet away, horror visible, even through the curse consuming his face. Seraphine smiled faintly through blood. I hated her, she whispered painfully. But I loved you more. Then her body went still. Lyra felt something inside the hall shift. Even the battle paused. Commander Thorne had not merely killed a noblewoman. He had murdered one of the most powerful daughters of the Dragon Court. And he had done it publicly. Kale looked at Seraphine's body, then at Thorne. Something terrifying entered his eyes. The last piece of his control shattered completely. Black fire exploded upward to the ceiling. The monstrous shadow behind Kale became solid at last. Huge, ancien, horribly beautiful. The dragon prince transformed. The court screamed as massive black wings burst from his back, shredding what remained of the throne hall. Jagged horns curved from his skull, while molten gold cracks spread beneath dark scales covering his body. But unlike the ancient dragon outside, Kael's transformed state looked wrong. Broken. The curse twisted his dragon form into something half-corrupted by darkness. A beast born from pain instead of fire. Commander Thorne backed away in horror. No. Kale crossed the hall in one movement. Not fast. Instant. One moment, he stood beside the shattered throne. The next, his clawed hand wrapped around Thorne's throat. The commander screamed as black fire spread across his armor. Please, you poisoned my kingdom, Kyle growled. The flames intensified. You betrayed your crown. Thorne clawed desperately at Kyle's arm. Then, Kael's voice dropped lower, more monstrous. You touched her. The black dragon fire consumed Thorne entirely. Nothing remained. The silence afterward felt unreal. Smoke drifted through the ruined throne room while burning debris collapsed around them. Temple soldiers retreated slowly in terror. Even the ancient dragon outside had gone still. Because now, there were two monsters in the palace, and one of them belonged to the throne. Kale turned slowly toward the court. Several nobles immediately dropped to their knees. Others fled outright. The dragon prince's chest rose heavily with unstable breaths, as darkness spread further across his transformed body. He was losing himself. Lyra could see it happening. The curse was no longer merely emerging. It was devouring him. King Valor stepped forward through the smoke, grief carved deeply into his aging face. My son. Kale's monstrous gaze snapped toward him. For one terrible second, Lyra thought he might attack even his father. Then Kale staggered violently. Pain ripped through him hard enough to crack the floor beneath his claws. The curse had gone too far. Black veins spread beneath his scales like poison flooding his entire body. Lyra ran to him without thinking. Lyra! No, the king shouted. Too late. She reached Kyle, just as the beast inside him turned fully toward her. The throne hall froze, because everyone expected the monster prince to tear her apart. Instead, Kale collapsed at her feet, his enormous wings shaking violently, his claws digging helplessly into the shattered marble. And through the monstrous transformation, his voice emerged broken and terrified. Run. The single word shattered Lyra's heart. Even now, even like this, he was trying to protect her from himself. Tears burned her eyes as she knelt before him. Then slowly, she placed both scarred hands against the side of his corrupted face. The entire palace held its breath. Her fire wings unfolded behind her. The bond mark beneath her collarbone blazed like a second sun. And for the first time since the curse awakened, Kael's black flames began turning gold. The moment Lyra touched him, the storm above the palace changed. Black clouds twisted violently over the capital as gold fire erupted through the cracks spreading beneath Kael's scales. The monstrous darkness consuming his body recoiled like a wounded animal beneath her hands. The throne hall fell silent. Not fearful silence, astonished silence, because the impossible was happening in front of the entire dragon court. The cursed heir of House Draven, the prince every noble secretly feared would someday lose his mind completely, was calming beneath the touch of the forbidden Skyfire girl. Kael's enormous wings trembled violently. His breathing slowed. The black veins crawling across his throat and chest began fading beneath waves of golden light pouring from Lyra's hands. The ancient dragon outside the palace lowered its head again, watching, waiting, recognizing something the rest of the court could barely understand. Lyra barely noticed any of it. All she could feel was Kael's pain. The connection between them had deepened the moment she touched him. Now his emotions flooded through her in fragmented waves so intense they almost drowned her completely. Fear, rage, loneliness, years of suffocating restraint. And beneath all of it, the realization struck hard enough to steal her breath. Kael had known about her long before tonight, long before the political marriage, long before the temple schemes. He had watched over her from afar for years, protecting her silently while carrying a curse that threatened to turn him into a monster. And somehow, that knowledge hurt more than betrayal, because it meant she had never truly been alone. Not entirely. Kael lifted his head slightly beneath her hands. His gold eyes flickered through the corruption again. Lyra. Hearing her name in that broken voice nearly shattered her. The black fire surrounding him continued turning gold wherever her touch spread. The curse was retreating, not disappearing completely, but weakening. The court noticed instantly. Whispers spread through the ruined throne hall. She's healing him. The prophecy, the Skyfire Queen, Priestess Mera's face had gone utterly pale now. For the first time all night, true panic broke through her carefully controlled composure, because this was not supposed to happen. The Skyfire bloodline had been feared for centuries because legends claimed their queens could dominate dragons through fire and blood. But this was something older, something the temple had likely tried to erase from history. Lyra was not controlling Kael. She was saving him. Mera stepped backward slowly. King Valor noticed immediately. And suddenly, the old king looked furious. Not politically angry, personally betrayed. "You knew," he said coldly. The priestess snapped toward him. "Your Majesty, you knew the Skyfire bond could stabilize the curse." Silence. The accusation echoed through the throne room like a blade. Kael's eyes narrowed dangerously beneath the fading corruption. Lyra looked between them in confusion. "What does that mean?" No one answered immediately. Then the king spoke softly. The royal curse began after the Skyfire queens were slaughtered. The hall went still. Even the remaining guards froze. Valor's expression darkened with old grief. For centuries, the temple claimed the Skyfires betrayed the throne, claimed they tried to enslave dragons through forbidden magic. His gaze locked onto Mera. But the truth was far simpler. The priestess's voice sharpened. "Do not. They feared the Skyfires, because our bloodlines were bonded." Lyra's pulse stopped. The king continued slowly, each word landing like thunder. The Draven kings carried destruction. The Skyfire queens carried balance. His tired eyes shifted toward Kael and Lyra. Together, they kept dragon madness under control. A horrifying realization spread through the court. The curse consuming the royal family was not natural. It was the result of the Skyfire bloodline being exterminated. Mera lifted her chin defiantly. The Skyfires were dangerous. "No," Valor replied coldly. "They were powerful, and the temple feared losing influence over the crown." Lyra stared at the priestess. All this death, all this suffering, the purges, the lies, Kael's curse. It had all begun because someone feared losing power. Mara's expression hardened again as panic transformed into desperation. "You speak of old history while the kingdom burns around us," she snapped. "Look outside." Everyone turned toward the shattered windows. The capital was in chaos. Fire spread across the lower districts from falling debris. Dragons circled the skies above the palace uncertainly, while soldiers fought in the streets below. Rumors had already begun spreading. The cursed prince had transformed. The Skyfire Queen had returned. The kingdom stood at the edge of collapse. Mara stepped toward the center of the hall, voice rising with renewed authority. "The people will never accept her," she declared loudly. "Not after tonight. Not after seeing what her blood awakened." The ancient dragon outside growled deeply. The priestess ignored it. "She brings fire, monsters, prophecy, and civil war." Mara pointed directly at Lyra. "And if the court allows her to remain beside the prince, the noble houses will rebel by dawn." Fear spread across several nobles immediately, not because they hated Lyra, because they knew Mara was right. The kingdom was unstable enough already. A cursed heir and a forbidden queen together could shatter it completely. Kale slowly rose to his feet beside Lyra. His transformed appearance remained frightening. Black scales still covered parts of his skin, massive dark wings looming behind him, but the monstrous frenzy had faded from his eyes. Now he simply looked dangerous, ancien, royal. The dragon prince turned toward the court. "Any noble who wishes to challenge her," he said quietly, "may challenge me first." The threat rolled through the hall like cold steel. Several lords immediately lowered their eyes, but Mara smiled faintly. "There it is." Kale narrowed his eyes. "The weakness that will destroy you." The priestess continued softly. "You would burn your own kingdom for her." Kale did not deny it. That frightened the court more than shouting would have. Lyra stared at him in shock. Even now, even after the palace burned, after his curse nearly consumed him, after the kingdom stood ready to turn against him, he was still choosing her publicly. The realization settled painfully inside her chest. Kale stepped closer until only inches separated them. The silver marriage chain between their wrists glowed softly in the firelight. Then, quietly enough that only she could hear, he said, "I tried to stay away from you." Lyra's breath caught. "When I found out you survived the purge, I swore I would protect you from a distance." His jaw tightened. "I thought if you stayed human, if you never awakened, then maybe you could live freely. You arranged the marriage." "Yes." "Why?" Pain crossed his face. "Because the temple finally found you." The truth hit hard. Every cold interaction, every guarded look, every distance he kept between them. Not rejection, fear. Kyle had married her to protect her. While convincing the court, he felt nothing for her. And somehow, that hurt worse. "You should have told me. I couldn't risk anyone hearing the truth." His eyes darkened slightly. "And I couldn't risk myself." Lyra frowned faintly. Kale looked away briefly before admitting, "I knew what the bond might do to me." Understanding spread slowly through her chest. He had stayed distant because he feared the mate bond itself. Feared becoming attached to the one person capable of stabilizing his curse. Feared needing her. The emotional restraint suddenly made terrible sense. Before Lyra could answer, the ancient dragon outside the palace roared again, this time not in pain. Warning. Kyle's head snapped toward the open sky instantly. The prince's expression changed. Something's wrong. Then the first scream echoed from below the palace cliffs. Not panic. Battle. Moments later, one of the western towers exploded in black fire. The entire throne hall shook violently. A blood-covered guard burst through the broken doors. "Your Highness," he gasped. "Northern war banners." Kale's face darkened instantly. The guard collapsed to one knee. "The Beast King's army has entered the capital." Silence crashed through the hall. Several nobles went visibly pale. Even Myra looked shocked. The Beast King. The ruler of the Northern Dragon territories had not crossed into Ashfire lands in nearly 20 years. His armies were legendary for slaughtering entire cities beneath frozen dragon fire. KL moved toward the shattered balcony immediately. Lyra followed. Far below the mountain palace, the capital city burned beneath storm-dark skies. And beyond the outer walls, thousands of black banners advanced through the snow. At their center stood a monstrous dragon, larger than any Lyra had ever seen. Its scales were white as bone. Its eyes burned ice blue. And riding atop the beast was a man wearing armor made from dragon skulls. The Beast King had come personally. Then, Lyra noticed something even worse. The Northern Army was not attacking the city. It was marching directly toward the palace. Toward her. The ancient dragon beside the palace towers growled deeply. Kael's expression hardened into pure fury. But before anyone could speak, the Beast King's voice thundered across the mountains through amplified dragon fire. "Return the Skyfire Queen," he roared, "or watch your kingdom fall before dawn." The mountains answered the Beast King's voice with echoes that rolled across the burning capital like thunder. "Return the Skyfire Queen." The demand struck the throne hall harder than any weapon. Below the palace cliffs, thousands of northern soldiers advanced through falling snow in perfect formation, while white war dragons circled overhead like vultures waiting for death. The black banners of the northern territories snapped violently in the storm winds, marked with the ancient symbol of a crowned beast skull split by ice. The entire court knew what that meant. The Beast King had not come to negotiate. He had come to claim. Kael stood motionless near the shattered balcony, massive dark wings half unfurled behind him. Gold fire flickered faintly beneath the black scales covering his arms and throat, the remnants of his curse still struggling beneath his skin. Yet now, another emotion burned stronger than the corruption. Rage. Pure, possessive rage. Lyra felt it through the bond instantly, not because the Beast King threatened the throne, because he had demanded her. King Valor stepped beside his son slowly, leaning heavily on his iron cane as he stared down at the approaching army. He crossed the northern border faster than any scout predicted, the old king murmured grimly. Kael's jaw tightened. He already knew she awakened. The realization settled cold and heavy across the ruined hall. Someone had informed him. Someone inside the kingdom. All eyes turned instinctively toward Priestess Mara. The High Priestess did not flinch. "The Northern King has spies everywhere," she replied coolly. "Do not look at me as though I invited him." Kael turned toward her slowly. "Didn't you?" The temperature in the hall dropped instantly. Even the remaining guards shifted uneasily. Mara met the prince's gaze without fear. "The Beast King fears the same thing we do," she said calmly. "A united Skyfire and Draven bloodline." Lyra's stomach tightened. United. The word sounded dangerously close to prophecy. Kael stepped closer to the priestess. "You would hand the kingdom to a butcher before allowing her near this throne?" "I would preserve this kingdom," Mara snapped sharply, finally losing control of her composure. "You think this is about hatred? About bloodline prejudice?" Her eyes burned with desperate fury now. "You have no idea what the Skyfire Queens were capable of." Lyra stared at her. For the first time, the priestess did not sound manipulative. She sounded afraid, truly afraid. "The last Skyfire Queen nearly burned the continent apart," Mara whispered. "Entire dragon clans bent to her will. Kings murdered their own blood at her command. Dragons turned against riders they had served for centuries." Kyle's expression darkened. "That is temple propaganda." "No," the priestess hissed. "That is history." The hall fell silent again. Lyra felt unease coil, deeper inside her chest, because fragments of memory still burned behind her eyes, from when the ancient dragon touched her earlier. Flames, war, screaming cities. What if the priestess was not entirely lying? What if the power inside her truly was dangerous? The bond mark beneath her collarbone pulsed painfully. Outside, another explosion shook the city. The Beast King's forces had reached the outer gates. Kael looked toward the burning capital below, then back toward Lyra, and despite everything happening around them, his expression softened slightly. "Only for her. You're leaving the palace." Lyra blinked. "What?" The Northern Army came for you specifically. If they breach the capital, I'm not running while your kingdom burns. It's already burning." The harshness in his voice startled her. Kale exhaled slowly, fighting for control again. Then quieter. "If he captures you, everything gets worse." Lyra stepped closer instead of retreating. "You think I'm safer without you?" The question hit him hard. She saw it instantly, because the truth was obvious now. Kale had spent years trying to protect her from afar, and failed. The temple found her. The court exposed her. The kingdom collapsed around them anyway. Distance had never truly protected either of them. The prince looked away briefly, jaw clenched. "That's exactly what terrifies me." The confession landed between them like a blade. Before Lyra could answer, the ancient dragon outside the palace suddenly growled low in its throat. Warning. Kale's head snapped upward instantly. Something massive moved through the storm clouds above the capital. Another dragon. No. 3. White-scaled war dragons descended through the snow, enormous wings scattering ash and embers across the burning city. Their riders wore black armor trimmed with silver bone markings. Northern assassins. One of the dragons dove straight toward the palace balcony. "Down!" Kale roared. He grabbed Lyra and pulled her against him just as frozen dragon fire exploded across the shattered throne hall. Ice and black flame tore through the chamber simultaneously. Guards screamed as frost spread across burning marble, freezing men alive where they stood. The palace itself groaned violently. The northern dragons crashed through the upper towers, and then the Beast King attacked. Not through armies. Personally. A massive shape descended from the storm above and slammed onto the palace bridge hard enough to shake the mountain itself. The white dragon. Its rider dismounted slowly through swirling snow. The Beast King looked less like royalty and more like war given human form. Tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in black fur-lined armor carved with old battle scars. His pale hair hung loose around a face too sharp and brutal to be called handsome, and his eyes, ice-blue dragon eyes, fixed directly onto Lyra. Not curious, not surprised. Certain. He knew exactly who she was. Kale moved in front of her instantly. The Beast King smiled faintly at that. "There he is," the northern ruler said softly. "The dying prince." Kale's black wings spread wider behind him. "You crossed my borders without permission, and yet your city still opened its gates." The Beast King's gaze slid briefly toward Myra. "Interesting, isn't it?" The throne hall went deadly still. Kale slowly turned toward the priestess. Myra's silence answered everything. Rage exploded through the prince's bonds so violently, Lyra almost staggered beneath it. The priestess had invited the Northern King, not to conquer the kingdom, to stop Lyra and Kale from uniting. The Beast King stepped fully into the ruined throne hall now, snow melting instantly against the heat of dragonfire around him. Several nobles immediately dropped to their knees, not out of loyalty. Fear. The northern ruler ignored them entirely. His attention remained fixed on Lyra. "She has her mother's eyes," he murmured. "Lyra Froze. You knew my mother?" Kale's expression darkened instantly. "Enough." But the Beast King continued calmly. "I watched Queen Illyria burn armies to ash before you were born, Little Skyfire." Little Skyfire. The word stirred something painfully familiar inside her chest. The Northern King studied her carefully. Then his gaze shifted toward the glowing bond chain between her and Kale. Understanding flickered across his face. "Ah," he said quietly. "So the prophecy completed itself after all." Kale's voice became lethal. "You will not speak another word about prophecy in my hall." The Beast King laughed softly. The sound carried no humor. "You think this is still your hall?" Outside, the sounds of battle intensified violently. Northern soldiers had breached the lower palace levels. The capital was falling. Kale knew it too. The prince stepped fully in front of Lyra, black dragon fire beginning to gather around his claws. "You should have stayed in the north and allowed the temple to kill the last Skyfire queen." The Beast King's eyes sharpened coldly. "I'm not here to kill her, Kyle. Lyra frowned. Then why are you here? The Beast King looked directly at her. Because your blood can wake something beneath the northern mountains that should never wake alone. Silence. The ancient dragon outside the palace snarled deeply. Kael's expression turned dangerous. Instantly. You're talking about the Frost Hollow. Even King Valor looked alarmed now. The Beast King's gaze never left Lyra. The old prisons are failing, he said quietly. And when they break, every kingdom on this continent burns. Lyra's pulse quickened painfully. Another prophecy. Another secret buried beneath centuries of lies. The Beast King stepped closer. You think tonight is chaos, he murmured. This is only the beginning. Kael moved immediately. Black fire exploded through the throne hall as the prince drew his sword and aimed it directly at the Northern King's throat. Take another step toward her, Kael growled, and I'll carve your heart out in front of your army. The Beast King smiled again. But this time, his dragon answered. Ice spread instantly across the shattered floor. The palace walls groaned, and behind the Northern King, an enormous skeletal shadow rose slowly through the storm clouds outside. Lyra's blood turned cold, because the thing moving behind the Beast King's dragon was not alive. It was ancient, dead, and somehow, still breathing. The Frost Hollow prison had already opened. The dead dragon rose behind the palace like a nightmare dragged from the bottom of the world. Its skeletal wings unfolded slowly through the storm clouds. Enormous bones wrapped in strips of rotting silver scales that should not still have existed after centuries beneath ice. Frost bled from its jaws in long streams of pale mist, freezing rain in midair before it touched the city below. And its eyes, empty, no fire, no soul, only ancient blue light burning inside hollow sockets. The entire throne hall froze in horror. Even the ancient dragon perched beside the palace towers recoiled slightly. The dead creature opened its jaws. A scream rolled across the mountains. Not sound. Memory. Lyra nearly collapsed as visions slammed violently into her mind. Frozen battlefields. Dragons tearing each other apart beneath black skies. Skyfire queens standing beside crowned beasts made from bone and ice. And beneath it all, a vast prison buried under the northern mountains. Cracking. Breaking. Hungry. Kael caught her before she fell. Instantly the visions weakened. His touch grounded her again. The dragon prince looked shaken now, not merely by the undead dragon outside, but by the effect it had on her. What did you see? Lyra struggled to breathe through the fragments, still tearing through her mind. There's something beneath the north, she whispered. Something alive. The Beast King's expression darkened. Yes. Kael's eyes narrowed sharply toward him. You already opened the prison. The northern ruler said nothing, and that silence was answer enough. Rage flashed across King Valor's face. You arrogant fool. The Beast King ignored the insult completely. 5 months ago, he said calmly, the ice beneath Frost Hollow began melting from below. His pale eyes shifted briefly toward Lyra. The old seals only react to skyfire blood. A terrible realization spread slowly through the throne hall. The prison had not begun weakening tonight. It had been failing long before Lyra awakened, which meant the Beast King had not invaded merely out of greed. He was desperate. Mara stepped forward sharply. You expect us to believe this? I expect nothing from the temple. The cold hatred in the Beast King's voice surprised even Lyra. Interesting. The northern ruler despised Mara, almost as much as Kael did. The Beast King turned toward Lyra, again. When your blood awakened tonight, the prison reacted instantly. His expression hardened. That creature followed me here because it senses you. Outside, the undead dragon slammed against the palace towers hard enough to crack stone. Screams echoed from below. Its icy breath spread across entire sections of the capital, freezing buildings solid beneath white crystal frost. The city was dying, and somehow, Lyra was connected to it. No, she whispered. Kael's grip tightened slightly around her wrist. Look at me. She obeyed, instinctively. This is not your fault. The certainty in his voice almost broke her. How could he still look at her that way while the kingdom collapsed around them? Another violent crash shook the palace. The undead dragon clawed its way higher along the outer towers, massive skeletal wings scraping across black stone. Soldiers fled in panic below as frozen debris rained through the streets. The ancient dragon beside the palace roared furiously and launched itself into the storm. The two colossal beasts collided above the capital. Fire and frost exploded across the sky. The entire mountain kingdom trembled. Kale's curse stirred violently beneath his skin again in response to the battle. Black scales flickered briefly across his jaw before fading under the warmth still flowing through the bond. Lyra noticed immediately, and so did the Beast King. The northern ruler studied them carefully. Then something almost unreadable crossed his face. Understanding. Interesting, he murmured softly. Kale's expression hardened instantly. Say what you came to say. The Beast King looked directly at Lyra. The bond stabilized him faster than expected. The throne hall fell silent again. Lyra frowned faintly. What does that mean? No one answered. Immediately. Then King Valor closed his eyes briefly, like a man exhausted by too many buried truths. The Skyfire Queens were not merely mates to the Draven Kings, the old ruler admitted quietly. They were bound to them by ancient blood rights. Lyra felt unease crawl deeper through her chest. Kyle's jaw tightened. The Beast King continued calmly. The curse inside Kyle's blood isn't natural dragon madness. His pale eyes shifted toward the prince. It was created. Kyle went still. So did the king. Even Mara looked alarmed now. Lyra stared between them in confusion. Created? The Beast King's voice lowered. Centuries ago, the Ember Temple poisoned the Draven bloodline to weaken the throne permanently. Shock ripped through the hall. Several nobles openly gasped. No, Mara snapped immediately. That is a lie. But something in her expression betrayed fear. Real fear. The Beast King saw it too. The temple could never fully control the Dragon Kings while the Skyfire Queens remained beside them. He continued coldly. So they separated the bloodlines, one generation at a time. Kyle's breathing slowed dangerously. The black flames around him flickered harder. The prince looked ready to kill someone. King Valor looked worse. Broken. Like a man finally seeing the shape of his kingdom's destruction after decades of blindness. The curse, Kale said quietly, all this time, was engineered. Silence crushed the throne hall. Lyra suddenly understood why the temple feared her existence so much. She was not merely forbidden. She was proof. Proof that the royal bloodline had been sabotaged for centuries. Proof that the Skyfire Purge had never been about protection. It had been about power. Mara lifted her chin sharply, despite the fear spreading around her. You would trust the word of a northern tyrant over the sacred temple? Kale turned toward her slowly, and for the first time since Lyra met him, the Dragon Prince looked truly merciless. My mother died, screaming from the curse your temple claimed was divine punishment. Myra flinched. Only slightly, but enough. Kale took one step forward. Black fire rolled across the floor beneath him. My brother tore his own heart out during transformation because he could no longer recognize his own mind. Another step. You stood beside my father for 20 years and called his suffering fate. The throne hall shook violently around them as the prince's fury intensified. And suddenly Lyra understood something else. Kyle's coldness. His restraint. His endless control. He had grown up watching everyone he loved destroyed by the curse waiting inside his own blood. No wonder he feared attachment. No wonder he feared the bond. He had expected death his entire life. Mara realized too late that she had lost the court. The nobles were staring at her differently now. Not with devotion. Suspicion. Commander Thorne's betrayal had already weakened trust in the temple. Now the kingdom's greatest secret threatened to collapse entirely. The priestess's eyes darted briefly toward the shattered western archway. Escape, Kale noticed instantly. So now you run. Mara's composure cracked fully at last. You fools, she hissed. You think truth changes what she is? Her finger pointed toward Lyra. The Skyfire Queens brought ruin long before the temple intervened. Outside, the undead dragon roared again, almost in answer. Mira's eyes widened suddenly, because the creature had stopped fighting the ancient dragon. It was staring directly into the throne hall. At Lyra, the frost-hollow beast had found her. A horrible pressure filled the air instantly. The bond mark beneath Lyra's collarbone burned so violently she cried out. Then, the undead dragon spoke. Not aloud. Inside her mind. Skyfire air. The voice sounded ancient and broken, like ice cracking over deep water. Open the prison. Lyra staggered backward in horror. Kyle caught her immediately. What happened? She could barely breathe. It spoke to me. Every face in the throne hall changed instantly. The undead dragon's hollow blue eyes blazed brighter outside the palace. Again the voice echoed through her mind. Open the prison, or all bloodlines perish. Then suddenly, the creature attacked the throne hall directly. Its skeletal claws smashed through the upper palace wall in an explosion of ice and stone. Nobles screamed as freezing wind tore through the chamber hard enough to extinguish half the remaining fires. The undead dragon forced its enormous skull through the collapsing wall, and every eye in its dead face locked onto Lyra. Kyle stepped in front of her instantly. The Beast King drew his weapon. Even the ancient dragon outside lunged toward the undead creature again. Too late. The frost-hollow dragon opened its jaws, and a storm of deathly ice exploded toward the throne room. The storm of ice devoured the throne hall. Frozen death exploded through the shattered palace wall in a tidal wave of white frost powerful enough to crack pillars apart like brittle bone. Nobles screamed as ice raced across the marble floor, swallowing flames, weapons, and living men alike beneath crystal death. Kale reacted instantly. Black and gold fire erupted from his body in a violent shield around Lyra, the opposing forces colliding with enough force to shake the mountain itself. The impact shattered every remaining window in the hall. Frost and dragon fire spiraled together through the chamber like battling storms. The undead dragon shrieked, not with rage, recognition. Its hollow eyes burned brighter as it stared directly at Lyra through the firestorm. Skyfire air. Open the prison. The voice clawed through her skull again. Lyra pressed trembling hands against her temples. Make it stop. Kale turned toward her immediately, despite holding the shield together. What is it saying? Before she could answer, the frost-hollow dragon slammed one skeletal claw into the throne room floor and dragged itself farther inside. The palace groaned violently. Stone cracked beneath its enormous weight. The creature's body radiated unnatural, cold strong enough to extinguish magic itself. Even Kale's flames flickered weakly whenever the undead beast moved closer. The ancient dragon outside roared furiously and crashed into the frost-hollow creature from behind, sending both colossal beasts tearing through the upper palace towers. The ceiling exploded apart. Snow poured into the throne hall beneath storm-dark skies. Below the collapsing palace, the capital city burned and froze simultaneously. Kale's shield faltered briefly. The curse beneath his skin surged again instantly. Black cracks spread across his scales. The undead dragon's presence was weakening him. No, Lyra realized with horror. It was feeding on him. The frost-hollow creature wanted corrupted dragon blood. The prince staggered once. That single moment was enough. The undead dragon lunged straight toward Lyra. Kyle moved before thought itself. He shoved her backward and intercepted the creature head-on as black fire exploded violently around him. The impact hurled both prince and monster through the shattered throne dais. The court screamed. Kale's transformed dragon form finally erupted completely. Massive black and gold wings burst outward through the storm, while horns of burning obsidian curved from his skull. His body expanded beneath armor, splitting apart from the force of transformation itself. Now there was no trace of humanity left in him physically, only a colossal dragon-shaped beast wrapped in cursed fire. But his eyes still searched for Lyra, still recognized her. The undead dragon slammed him through the western palace wall. Both monsters vanished into the storm outside. The sound of their collision echoed across the kingdom. Lyra ran toward the shattered opening instinctively. Kyle. The Beast King caught her arm before she reached the collapsing edge. You'll die out there. He's alone. He's a dragon king. He's losing control. The northern ruler stared at her sharply. Then his gaze dropped toward the glowing bond mark burning beneath her collarbone. Understanding crossed his face instantly. The bond is deepening too quickly. Lyra barely heard him. Far outside the palace, Kael and the undead dragon tore through the sky above the capital in a storm of fire and ice. Every clash illuminated the mountains like lightning. But Kael was weakening. She could feel it. Through the bond. The frost hollow creature was draining the curse inside him and feeding on it. King Valor approached slowly through the ruined throne hall, blood staining one side of his robes from falling debris. "There's no time left," the old king said quietly. The Beast King looked toward him grimly. Valor's tired eyes settled on Lyra. The prison must be sealed again. The words turned her blood cold. "How?" Silence answered first. Then Mara laughed softly from near the collapsed pillars. Everyone turned sharply. The priestess stood wounded now, blood running down one side of her face, beneath drifting snow and ash. But she was smiling. "You finally understand," she whispered. Kael had been right. She was not afraid anymore, because now there was only inevitability left. "The prison cannot be sealed by force," Mara said quietly. "Only by blood." Lyra felt dread settle deep into her stomach. "No." The priestess looked directly at her. "The first Skyfire queens bound their souls into the northern seals centuries ago. That is why your bloodline disappeared one generation at a time." The Beast King's expression darkened. "They sacrificed themselves, Maira Noldadwans, to keep the hollow asleep." Outside, another explosion lit the sky. Kael roared in pain. Lyra flinched instinctively. The bond between them pulsed violently. The frost hollow dragon's voice echoed again inside her skull. "Open the prison." The priestess smiled sadly now. "The temple feared the Skyfires because your queens could either save kingdoms," her gaze shifted toward the burning city below, "or doom them forever." King Valor stepped closer to Lyra. For the first time, the dying king looked not like a ruler, but a father. "If the hollow awakens fully," he said softly, "every dragon on this continent will become corrupted." Lyra's breath caught painfully. Kael, the curse, the dead dragon. It was all connected. The corruption inside House Draven had never been merely poison. It was leakage, fragments of the hollow prison escaping through dragon bloodlines for centuries. And now, the seal was finally breaking, entirely. The Beast King looked toward the battle raging above the city. He cannot hold it much longer. As if answering him, Kael crashed through one of the upper palace towers in a violent storm of black fire. The frost hollow dragon slammed him into the mountain cliffs beyond the capital. The prince roared in agony. Then, Lyra felt it. Fear. Not her fear. His. Kael was terrified. Not of dying. Of becoming like the creature he fought. The realization shattered something inside her. He had spent his entire life fearing the monster inside himself, and now he was fighting the source of it alone. Lyra stepped toward the shattered balcony edge. The Beast King immediately grabbed her arm again. "You know what happens if you go." "Yes. You may never come back." She looked at him calmly. "What kind of queen hides while everyone else burns?" The northern ruler released her slowly. Respect flickered across his cold expression for the first time. King Valor closed his eyes briefly, as though mourning something inevitable. Mara watched silently now. No triumph left in her face, only exhaustion. Perhaps she had spent her entire life trying to prevent this exact moment. Lyra spread her fire wings slowly. The storm answered instantly. Gold flames spiraled around her body as the bond mark beneath her collarbone blazed brighter than ever before. The entire ruined throne hall illuminated in skyfire, and for one impossible moment, every dragon in the capital went still. They felt her awakening fully, not as a weapon, not as a queen, as balance itself. Lyra turned toward the storm beyond the palace, toward Kael. Through the bond, she felt him fading, still fighting, still trying to protect everyone even while the corruption consumed him. Tears burned her eyes. Then, softly, Almost like a vow, she whispered, "You are not fighting alone anymore." And she leapt into the storm. The fire wings carried her upward instantly. This time there was no clumsy fear in the flight. The sky itself welcomed her. Below, the kingdom watched in stunned silence as the girl once offered to the dragon court, like a disposable treaty, rose above the burning capital crowned in living gold fire. The Frost Hollow dragon saw her immediately. Its dead eyes widened. "Skyfire Queen." The voice thundered across her mind. Kael looked up too. His massive black dragon form hovered bloodied above the mountain cliffs, flames flickering weakly around torn wings and shattered scales. And when he saw her, hope exploded through the bond so powerfully it nearly broke her heart. Lyra flew straight toward him. The undead dragon lunged instantly. Too slow. She reached Kael first. The moment her hands touched his burning scales, the mate bond awakened completely. Gold fire erupted across the night sky. Every dragon in the kingdom roared at once. Kael's corrupted flames transformed instantly from black to radiant gold as ancient skyfire magic poured through both their souls like sunlight breaking through endless winter. The Frost Hollow dragon screamed. For the first time since emerging from the prison, he was afraid. Gold fire consumed the storm. It spread across the sky in enormous waves the moment Lyra's soul fully bonded with Kael's, illuminating the burning capital beneath them brighter than dawn. The mountains trembled as ancient magic long buried beneath blood, grief, and centuries of lies awakened completely for the first time in generations. Every dragon in the kingdom felt it. The balance had returned. Kael's monstrous form shuddered violently beneath Lyra's touch. Black corruption cracked apart across his scales like shattered obsidian, revealing streams of molten gold fire burning underneath. Torn wings healed slowly, in bursts of living flame. The madness inside him screamed in resistance, then broke, not destroyed, purified. Kael inhaled sharply as though breathing freely for the first time in his life. Through the bond, Lyra felt the crushing weight vanish from him. The endless pain, the constant fear. The beast no longer fought him. It bowed. The dragon prince opened his eyes. Pure gold. No darkness left. And the way he looked at her then nearly unraveled her completely. Not like a weapon. Not like prophecy. Not like salvation. Like home. The Frost Hollow dragon shrieked in fury. Its skeletal wings tore through the storm clouds as deathly frost exploded outward across the mountains, freezing entire palace towers beneath white crystal ice. The creature lunged straight toward them. Kael moved first this time. A roar erupted from his chest, powerful enough to split clouds apart. Gold fire exploded from his jaws as he slammed into the undead dragon midair, driving the massive creature backward through the storm. The collision shook the capital below. But now, the battle had changed. Kael was no longer weakening, and Lyra realized something terrifying. The Frost Hollow dragon knew it too. The undead beast turned its hollow eyes toward her instead. Not him. Here, the prison creature had finally understood the truth. She was the key. If she died, the balance died with her. The Frost Hollow dragon abandoned Kael instantly and surged toward Lyra with horrifying speed. Kael roared in rage. Too far away. Too late. The undead dragon opened its jaws, and Lyra heard the voice again, inside her mind. Join us. Not singular. Plural. 1,000 ancient voices whispered beneath the creature's words. Dragon souls. Corrupted. Trapped inside the hollow prison. The realization nearly froze her in terror. The Frost Hollow was not merely a prison. It was a graveyard, an entire abyss filled with corrupted dragons chained beneath the northern mountains for centuries. And now, they were waking. The undead beast crashed into her. Pain exploded through Lyra as skeletal claws wrapped around her body midair. Frost spread instantly across her fire wings, extinguishing sections of gold flame one shard at a time. She screamed. The creature dragged her upward into the storm violently. Kael's roar shattered the sky behind them, but the Frost Hollow dragon moved unnaturally fast now, driven by desperation. Below, The kingdom watched in horror as the Skyfire Queen vanished into black clouds wrapped in the claws of death itself. The undead dragon's voice filled her skull. "Open the prison willingly, and your mate lives." Lyra froze. The creature showed her visions instantly. Kyle, falling beneath endless armies of corrupted dragons. The capital drowning in black frost. Every dragon kingdom collapsing into madness. And at the center of it all, the prison beneath the north splitting open completely. The Hollow wanted freedom, and it believed her blood could grant it. Lyra's fire flickered violently around her. Fear surged. Not for herself, for Kale. The Frost Hollow dragon tightened its claws around her. Choose. Then suddenly, black and gold fire ripped through the storm behind them. Kyle. The dragon prince slammed into the undead creature with catastrophic force, tearing Lyra free from its grasp before driving the Frost Hollow dragon straight through the side of a frozen mountain peak. The entire cliff exploded apart. Stone and ice rained into the valleys below. Kael caught Lyra against his chest midair. "You hurt," he demanded instantly. Even now, even during this, Lyra almost laughed, through the tears burning her eyes. "You came after me." Kael stared at her like the answer should have been obvious. Always. The single word shattered every wall still left inside her heart. Then the mountain exploded again. The Frost Hollow dragon emerged from the avalanche screaming. But now, it was changing. The dead flesh hanging from its bones began tearing apart completely as blue light erupted through every crack in its skeletal body. The prison below the north was opening wider, and something inside was feeding power into the creature directly. Kael's expression darkened. "We're running out of time." Far below them, the Beast King's white dragon rose through the storm, carrying the northern ruler toward the battlefield. The king's voice echoed upward. "The seal is breaking." As if answering him, the mountain split. A deafening crack thundered across the northern horizon. Then blue light erupted from somewhere deep beneath the earth itself. Even from this distance, Lyra could feel it. The hollow had opened. Not fully, but enough. The storm changed instantly. Dragon screams echoed across the continent. One by one, dragons throughout the capital began losing control. Guards transformed violently in the streets below. Noble dragons crashed into buildings consumed by sudden madness. Fire spread everywhere as corrupted dragon instincts flooded through the kingdom. The curse was awakening in all of them. Kyle felt it too. His body tensed beside her as dark whispers stirred again beneath the bond. Lyra grabbed his face immediately. "Stay with me." His eyes locked onto hers instantly. The corruption weakened again. The mate bond stabilized him, but not the others. The kingdom was unraveling. King Valor's voice echoed upward from the palace balcony below through amplified dragon fire. "Lyra?" She looked down. The dying king stood alone atop the ruined balcony beneath swirling snow and ash. And suddenly, he looked ancient, not merely old. A man who had carried too many regrets for too long. "There's only one way to seal the hollow again," he shouted. Kael's expression changed instantly. "No." Lyra's stomach tightened. The king looked directly at her. The first Skyfire Queen forged the prison using her own soul. His voice cracked slightly. "And only another Skyfire Queen can restore it." Silence. The truth settled like death across the storm. Kael turned toward his father slowly. "No." This time it sounded less like anger, more like terror. Valor's eyes filled with grief. "If the prison remains open, every dragon alive will eventually become corrupted." Kael's wings spread protectively around Lyra instantly. "There has to be another way." "There isn't." The Frost Hollow dragon screamed again as more blue light erupted from the broken mountains beyond the north. The continent itself was beginning to shake. Lyra understood then. This was never merely a kingdom conflict. The Hollow threatened every dragon bloodline alive. Kael grabbed her wrist suddenly. "You are not sacrificing yourself." The desperation in his voice broke her heart. For the first time since meeting him, the Dragon Prince looked completely unguarded, completely afraid. Lyra touched his face gently. "What happens if the Hollow fully opens?" Kale said nothing, because they both already knew. The world burns. Tears filled his eyes anyway. I just found you. The confession nearly destroyed her. Not because of the words, because of the raw honesty behind them. All the restraint, all the distance, all the years. He forced himself not to care too much. Gone. And beneath it remained only a man, terrified of losing the woman he loved. Lyra pressed her forehead against his. You once asked what I was. Kale closed his eyes tightly. You're my heart. The answer came instantly, without hesitation. And somehow, that made it worse. Because now leaving him felt impossible. The frost-hollow dragon rose again through the storm behind them, stronger than before. The broken mountains glowed, with widening blue cracks across the horizon. The hollow was opening completely. Kyle pulled Lyra against him desperately. No, he whispered. But through the bond, she could already feel the ancient prison calling her name. The hollow called to her like a wound buried beneath the world. Lyra felt it pulsing through the mountains far beyond the burning capital, ancient, starving, endless. Blue fractures spread across the northern horizon like veins of light beneath dark skin, each crack releasing more corrupted dragon souls into the storm. And every second the prison widened. More dragons lost themselves. Below the palace, the capital had descended into chaos completely. Dragon riders screamed as their bonded beasts turned feral mid-air. Noble houses barricaded themselves behind burning gates. Entire sections of the city vanished beneath storms of black frost, erupting from corrupted transformations. The curse was no longer confined to royal blood. The hollow was infecting all of them. Kale wrapped both arms around Lyra, as if holding her tightly enough might stop fate itself. You are not going, he said hoarsely. The words trembled, not with uncertainty, with desperation. Lyra closed her eyes briefly, against the pain tearing through her chest. Through the bond, she could feel every emotion inside him now, with devastating clarity. Fear, love, rage, hope, the unbearable terror of finally finding something worth living for, only to risk losing it immediately. She touched his face gently. Kyle. No. His voice cracked this time. The mighty dragon prince, the feared heir of House Draven, who faced assassins, rebellion, and monsters, without flinching, looked utterly shattered. And somehow, that hurt her more than the hollow itself. Below them, King Valor stared upward silently from the ruined balcony. The old king already knew. There was no other ending. The Beast King rose through the storm beside them atop his white dragon, pale eyes grim beneath swirling snow. The prison cracks are spreading faster now, he warned. Almost immediately, another roar thundered across the continent. Not one dragon, hundreds. The sound echoed through mountain valleys like the world breaking apart. Lyra turned slowly toward the north, and for one terrible moment, she saw through the hollow. Thousands of dragon souls chained beneath endless ice. Some monstrous, some weeping, some no longer remembering their own names. Ancient Skyfire queens stood among them like fading stars, holding the prison together with the last fragments of their souls. Waiting, enduring, alone. One of them turned toward her suddenly. Her mother, Queen Eloria. Not fully alive, not fully dead, just enough remaining for sorrow. Lyra's breath shattered. Mother. The spirit smiled sadly. You were never meant to awaken this soon. Tears burned Lyra's eyes instantly. Why didn't you tell me? She whispered brokenly. Because we wanted you to have a life. The answer nearly destroyed her. Below, another palace tower collapsed into flame. Kale heard none of the conversation inside her mind, but he saw her expression change, and terror entered his eyes immediately. No, he whispered again. Lyra looked at him slowly. The storm howled around them. Gold fire and snow spiraled through the sky, and in the middle of the collapsing world, she realized something terrible. For the first time in her life, she did not want to be brave. She wanted him. She wanted mornings beside palace windows. Arguments, laughter, his arms around her without fear, a future The cruelty of fate settled heavily inside her chest. Because now that she finally had something worth staying for, the world demanded she leave it behind. Kale pulled her closer, as if sensing the direction of her thoughts through the bond. "You're thinking goodbye." Lyra tried to answer. Couldn't. His expression broke completely. "No." The words sounded almost childlike. Rough. Helpless. Kyle pressed his forehead against hers desperately. "I spent years protecting you from shadows," he whispered. "I buried every feeling I had because I thought distance would keep you alive." His breathing shook violently. "Do not ask me to survive losing you now." Tears slipped down Lyra's face. "You would survive. I don't want to." Silence. The confession hung between them, more intimate than any vow. Even the Beast King looked away quietly. Kyle's hands trembled slightly against her waist. "You are the first thing that ever silenced the monster inside me," he whispered. "The first thing that ever felt like peace." The mate bond pulsed painfully bright. Lyra could barely breathe beneath the weight of loving him, because she did love him now. Not the prince, not the prophecy. The lonely boy who watched her hidden carriage disappear into snow years ago and spent the rest of his life trying to keep her alive from afar. Another crack split across the northern horizon. The hollow screamed. Every dragon in the kingdom cried out at once. Kyle staggered slightly as the corruption tried surging through his blood again. Lyra caught his face immediately. The darkness weakened beneath her touch, but only temporarily. She understood now. The bond stabilized him because Skyfire magic balanced dragon corruption naturally. If she disappeared, the curse would eventually return. The realization hollowed her completely. Kyle saw the understanding in her eyes. "No." Lyra kissed him before he could say anything else. The world stopped. The storm, the screams, the burning kingdom below them, all of it vanished beneath the warmth of his mouth against hers. Kale froze in shock for one heartbeat. Then his arms tightened around her, like he was drowning. Gold fire exploded softly through the sky around them as the mate bond deepened completely. Not political, not magical. Chosen. Lyra poured everything she could not say into the kiss. Every lonely year, every wound, every moment he almost protected her before allowing himself to. Kale kissed her like a man trying to memorize the shape of her soul. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were trembling. Lyra rested her forehead against his. "I love you." The prince closed his eyes tightly, like the words physically hurt him. Then he whispered back, "You are my kingdom." The bond shattered open completely. Not painfully, beautifully. For one breathtaking moment, their souls became transparent to each other. Lyra saw everything. Kale, as a child standing beside her hidden carriage in the snow. Kyle secretly tracking reports from the human territories for years just to ensure she remained alive. Kyle refusing every noble bride because none of them felt right beside the emptiness inside him. Kale seeing her again at the wedding banquet and realizing instantly he was already doomed. And Kyle tonight, terrified every second that loving her would kill her. Lyra nearly broke apart from the weight of it. Then her mother's voice returned softly inside her mind. The hollow widens. The prison was failing faster now. The ancient Skyfire queens could no longer hold it alone. Lyra looked northward one final time, and she understood what had to happen. Not sacrifice. Inheritance. The Skyfire queens had never merely died sealing the hollow. They became part of it, guardians standing between the world and corruption forever. KL saw the realization settle across her face, and suddenly the mighty dragon prince looked utterly terrified. "Lyra," she touched his cheek gently. "If I don't do this, you'll lose yourself again eventually. I don't care." "Yes, you do. Not more than you." The honesty in his voice almost shattered her resolve. But below them, dragons continued screaming across the kingdom. Children cried in burning streets. The world was dying. Lyra inhaled, shakily. Then she made her choice. Gold fire erupted around her wings. The ancient dragon circling the palace roared softly, as though mourning her already. KL grabbed her wrists, desperately. Please. One word. Broken. Lyra kissed his forehead. When the world remembers the Skyfire Queens, she whispered softly. Make sure they remember we loved fiercely. Tears finally spilled down Kyle's face openly. He did not hide them. Did not look away. The Dragon Prince fell to his knees in the storm before her. Not as ruler. Not as heir. As a man begging fate for mercy. And the kingdom watched in stunned silence as the cursed prince bowed before the woman he loved. The public reversal shattered through every lie the court once believed. Not weak human bride. Not dangerous weapon. Queen. Lyra touched his face one final time. Then she turned toward the north, toward the hollow, and flew into the storm alone. The sky swallowed her. Gold fire streamed behind Lyra as she flew north through the storm, leaving the burning capital farther behind with every beat of her wings. Snow and ash spiraled around her in violent winds, while thunder cracked across the mountains beneath fractured blue light pouring from the hollow. Below her, entire valleys had frozen solid. Corrupted dragons tore through forests and villages in blind madness, spreading black frost wherever they passed. Rivers crystallized into jagged ice. Ancient mountain temples collapsed into glowing chasms, splitting the earth open from within. The world was unraveling, and at the center of it all waited the hollow. Lyra flew harder, not because she was fearless, because if she stopped moving, she would think about Kale, about the look on his face when she left. The memory nearly shattered her concentration entirely. Behind her, far in the distance, a dragon roared. Coil. The sound carried through the bond instantly. Not rage. Buying. He was following her. Of course he was. Tears burned Lyra's eyes again. You promised, she whispered brokenly into the storm. Please don't make this harder. But deep down, a selfish part of her was glad he came. The northern mountains rose before her at last. Massive black cliffs split by glowing blue fractures stretching deep into the earth itself. Entire glaciers had shattered apart around the hollow prison, exposing ancient ruins buried beneath the ice for centuries. And there, at the center of the mountains, the prison stood open. Lyra slowed in horror. The hollow was not a cave. It was an abyss. A colossal wound carved into the heart of the world itself, surrounded by shattered pillars covered in ancient skyfire runes glowing faintly beneath layers of frost and blood. Endless blue light pulsed from the depths below like the heartbeat of something sleeping badly, or waking. The undead dragon circled above the abyss protectively alongside dozens of corrupted beasts now emerging from the storm one by one, waiting for her. The moment Lyra landed near the edge of the hollow, the whispers began. Thousands of voices, dragon souls trapped beneath the prison calling her name from the darkness below. Skyfire air. Open the gates. Set us free. The sound nearly drove her to her knees. Gold fire erupted instinctively around her body, holding the voices back slightly. Then, footsteps crunched softly behind her. Coil. Lyra closed her eyes painfully before turning around. The Dragon Prince stood several feet away in full dragon form beneath the storm-dark sky. Black and gold wings spread wide behind him. Snow melted instantly wherever he stepped. His face remained partially scaled, but his eyes were only his now. Only Kale. And they looked ruined. You lied to me, he said quietly. Lyra's throat tightened. If I told you the truth, you would have followed me anyway. Yes. No hesitation. No shame. Just truth. The simplicity of it almost destroyed her. Kyle stepped closer slowly. The hollow growled beneath the mountains. Ancient frost cracked across the ground around them. Still, he only looked at her. I spent my entire life believing love was weakness, he admitted softly. Because everything I ever loved was eventually taken from me. His voice roughened painfully. Then you walked into my court wearing silver chains and pretending not to be afraid. Lyra looked away quickly, before tears broke her apart completely. Kale lifted one trembling hand toward her face. You were brave, long before you had wings. The words shattered her. because no one had ever seen that part of her before. Not the fearlessness, the endurance, the quiet decision to survive anyway. Kyle stepped closer still, until only inches separated them beside the edge of the abyss. "Do not ask me to lose you," the hollow screamed beneath them. Blue light exploded upward from the abyss. The undead dragon descended suddenly behind Lyra, enormous skeletal wings blocking the storm itself. "Time ends." The voice thundered across the mountains inside both their minds. Then the prison cracked wider. The earth split violently. A colossal claw erupted from the abyss below. Not undead, not corrupted. Ancien, alive. Kael shoved Lyra backward instantly as the creature beneath the hollow began climbing toward the surface. The first dragon. Lyra knew it instinctively. The original king buried beneath the prison centuries ago. Its body looked monstrous beyond imagination, larger than castles, scales black as voidstone, ancient chains still embedded deep within its flesh. Corruption leaked from its eyes like liquid shadow. The first dragon opened its jaws. Entire mountains shook, and suddenly every corrupted dragon surrounding the hollow bowed instantly, not out of fear. Devotion. Kael's expression darkened. If that thing fully escapes, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. The world ends. The first dragon's gaze locked directly onto Lyra. Skyfire blood returns. The voice cracked across the sky like thunder. Lyra forced herself to stand, despite terror clawing through her chest. "You were imprisoned for a reason." The first dragon laughed. The sound shattered nearby cliffs instantly. "I was betrayed." Fragments of memory slammed into Lyra again. Ancient kings, dragon wars, skyfire, queens weeping, while sealing monstrous creatures beneath the mountains. And at the center of it all, the first dragon losing its mind, slowly beneath corruption spreading through its blood. The same corruption now infecting all dragonkind. The realization hit brutally. The royal curse began here. The hollow had poisoned dragons for centuries, from beneath the earth itself. Kael moved protectively in front of Lyra. Again. The first dragon's burning eyes narrowed. Draven blood still serves the cage. Black fire rolled across Kael's claws. "You said of it no one." The ancient beast roared. Neither fire nor frost answered it. Darkness did. Shadow spread across the mountains instantly, as corrupted dragons rose behind the first dragon in endless numbers. Lyra understood then. The prison was already too damaged. Sealing the hollow alone would no longer be enough. The first dragon itself had to be bound again, and only Skyfire blood could do it. Her mother's voice echoed softly inside her mind. "You were born for balance, not sacrifice." Balance. Lyra suddenly understood what the ancient queens truly were. Not prisoners, anchors, living seals, connected directly to dragon souls themselves. She turned toward Kael slowly, and for the first time since leaving the palace, she smiled. Small, heartbroken. "Certain." Kael immediately shook his head. "No, I know how to stop this. No. If the first dragon is bound again, the corruption ends. No." The desperation in his voice cut deeper every time. Lyra stepped closer and touched his face gently. "You once told me I silenced the monster inside you." Kael's gold eyes filled with grief instantly. "You are not becoming part of that prison. I won't be alone." The hollow wind shifted softly around her, and suddenly, the ancient Skyfire queens appeared. Golden figures, standing along the cliff surrounding the abyss, glowing faintly through snow and shadow. Dozens of women crowned in fire, watched silently across centuries of sacrifice and memory. Among them stood Illyria. Lyra's mother smiled sadly. Waiting, not dead, enduring together. Kael looked at the spirits in horror, because now he finally understood the truth. The Skyfire queens never truly left the hollow once they sealed it. Lyra pressed her forehead gently against his. "I'm so tired of fear, deciding everything." Kael grabbed her wrists desperately. "I love you." The words came violently this time, like something ripped from his soul. "I love you enough to burn kingdoms for you." Lyra's composure finally cracked. Tears spilled freely down her face as she kissed him again beneath the storm-dark sky, while the world trembled around them. Cale kissed her like a starving man, like prayer, like grief. And when they finally parted, his forehead rested against hers as both of them shook from the pain of what came next. "You are my mate," he whispered brokenly. "My queen, my heart." His voice collapsed completely. "Please." Lyra smiled through tears. Then softly, "So come find me again." And before he could stop her, she stepped backward into the hollow. Cale screamed her name. Gold fire erupted across the abyss instantly. The ancient Skyfire queens raised their hands as one, and Lyra fell into eternity. Cale dove after her without hesitation. The moment Lyra disappeared into the hollow, the Dragon Prince launched himself over the abyss edge through storms of gold fire and shadow, ignoring the screams of ancient dragons shaking the mountains around him. Only one thought existed inside him now: her. The wind howled violently as he descended into the depths below, black and gold wings cutting through endless darkness, while fragments of ancient magic exploded around him like falling stars. "Lyra." His voice vanished into the hollow. No answer came back. Only whispers. Thousands upon thousands of dragon souls chained beneath the world, murmuring in languages older than kingdoms themselves. The deeper Cale fell, the colder the hollow became. Not ordinary cold, soul-deep cold. The kind that erased memory. Around him stretched colossal ruins buried beneath ice and darkness. Ancient dragon temples wrapped in chains thick as castle towers. Broken skeletons of dead kings rested against frozen cliffs. Rivers of pale blue fire flowed beneath the abyss like veins through a corpse. And everywhere, corruption. Black crystals spread across the hollow walls like living disease. Cale's curse stirred violently beneath his skin in response. The darkness recognized this place, because it was born here. The realization filled him with murderous hatred. His entire life had been poisoned by the hollow, his family destroyed, his blood corrupted, his kingdom manipulated into fear and weakness for centuries, all because something monstrous beneath the earth refused to die. Then he saw her, far below. Lyra floated in the center of the abyss, surrounded by golden spirits, the Skyfire queens. Their fire illuminated the hollow like dawn breaking beneath the world. Ancient crowns glimmered atop silver and crimson hair while their eyes burned with endless sorrow and strength. And at their center stood Illyria, Lyra's mother. Cale crashed onto a frozen cliff near them and staggered forward immediately. "Lyra." She turned. The sight of her nearly destroyed him. Gold fire surrounded her body now completely, transforming the white wedding gown into something ethereal and radiant. Her wings blazed brighter than the sun itself against the darkness below. Beautiful, ancien, intouchable, and somehow farther away already. Cale reached for her desperately, but the moment his hand touched the edge of her fire, the hollow screamed. Black corruption exploded upward beneath the abyss as the first dragon slammed against invisible chains deeper below. The bond must break. The voice thundered through the prison violently. The Skyfire queens remained silent. Lyra's expression crumpled instantly. "No." Illyria stepped forward softly. "The seal cannot hold if the queen remains bound to the world above." Cale's chest tightened painfully. What does that mean? But he already knew. The mate bond. The thing keeping Lyra connected to life beyond the hollow. The thing keeping her soul human. It had to be severed. No. Cale backed away instantly. No. The ancient queens watched him with quiet grief. Illyria's voice remained gentle. If the bond remains intact, the hollow will eventually use it to escape through him. Cale's curse pulsed violently beneath his skin, as if proving her point. The hollow was already trying. Lyra stared at him in horror. There had to be another way. There had to be. Cale crossed the distance between them instantly and grabbed her face with trembling hands. "I will destroy this prison stone by stone before I let them take you from me." Lyra almost broke at the desperation in his voice. But deep down, she understood. The Hollow had waited centuries for weakness. Love was weakness here, and it would use the bond between them to destroy everything eventually. Kale looked toward the Skyfire Queens with raw fury. You endured this for centuries? Illyria smiled sadly. We endured because the world still needed saving. Kyle's breathing roughened. That's not living. No, Illyria whispered. It isn't. The honesty of it hollowed the abyss itself. Lyra felt tears burning down her face again. She had imagined sacrifice. Death. Not this. Not eternity trapped beneath the world, separated from the man she loved. The first dragon roared again beneath the prison. The chains binding the abyss shook violently. Cracks spread. The Hollow was running out of time too. Kyle pulled Lyra against him fiercely. I'm not leaving you here. You may not have a choice. Then I choose ruin. The answer came instantly, without fear, without hesitation. And that was the problem. KL would absolutely let the world burn for her if pushed far enough. Lyra realized the ancient queens understood it too. That kind of love could destroy kingdoms, or save them. Illyria stepped closer to her daughter slowly. When I sealed the Hollow, she said softly, I believed love made me weak. Her eyes shifted briefly toward Kyle. I was wrong. Lyra frowned faintly. Then why sever the bond? Because love is not possession. Silence. The Hollow groaned beneath them. Illyria touched Lyra's cheek, gently. You are not losing him forever. Kale laughed bitterly. How comforting. But Illyria only looked at him calmly. The Skyfire Queens were never meant to remain below eternally. That changed everything. Lyra's breath caught. What? The ancient queens exchanged glances. Then, Illyria spoke carefully. When balance fully returns to dragonkind, the prison no longer requires living anchors. Kale went still instantly. Hope. Terrible, dangerous hope. Lyra felt it surge violently through the bond. How long? Kyle demanded. No one answered immediately. That terrified him. Finally, Illyria whispered, We don't know. The hope cracked, not shattered. Worse, because now there was possibility, and possibility could keep a man suffering forever. Kale understood immediately too. His expression became unbearable. He turned toward Lyra slowly. I would wait. The words nearly brought her to her knees. Kyle, 100 years, 1,000. His voice shook. I would wait until the stars died, if it meant seeing you again. The mate bond pulsed painfully bright between them. The Hollow hated it. Darkness exploded upward across the abyss walls, as the first dragon strained violently against its chains below. Enough. The prison cracked again. Corrupted dragon souls screamed through the depths. The Skyfire Queens raised their hands instantly, strengthening the weakening seals around the abyss. But Lyra saw the truth. They were exhausted. Centuries exhausted. The Hollow would break them eventually without help. Kyle saw it too. His shoulders lowered slightly. Defeat. Real defeat. He finally understood there was no battle left to fight physically. Only grief. Lyra stepped closer slowly. Kale touched his forehead against hers desperately. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Words felt too small now. Finally, Kyle whispered, I never got to give you a real wedding. The sadness in his voice shattered her completely. Lyra laughed softly through tears. You gave me a kingdom. I would have given you peace too. The mate bond glowed warmly around them. Not violently now. Tenderly. Like the final heartbeat of something beautiful. Kale removed the royal chain from around his neck slowly. A black and gold pendant bearing the crest of House Draven. The heir's seal. The symbol of the dragon throne itself. He pressed it into Lyra's hand. So you remember where home is. Lyra closed trembling fingers around it. Then slowly, Kale dropped to one knee before her. The Hollow went silent. Even the first dragon stopped raging beneath the abyss. The dragon prince bowed his head before the Skyfire Queen, exactly as he had before the kingdom. Not out of duty. Devotion. My queen, he whispered brokenly. Come back to me when the world is worthy of you. Lyra collapsed into his arms, crying. And somewhere above the abyss, Dawn began touching the mountains. Dawn rose slowly, over a broken world. Above the hollow, the storm finally began to weaken. Black clouds tore apart beneath pale morning light, while snow drifted softly across shattered mountains, stained by war and dragonfire. For the first time in centuries, the corruption was retreating. Across the continent, dragons that had descended into madness collapsed, trembling from the sky as black frost cracked apart beneath golden fire spreading through their blood. Cities stopped burning, rivers thawed. The terrible whispers leaking from the hollow faded slowly into silence. Balance had returned, but deep beneath the northern mountains, Lyra stood at the edge of eternity. The Skyfire Queens surrounded her in silence, while ancient runes awakened across the abyss walls one by one, blazing gold beneath layers of ice and shadow. Endless chains tightened around the first dragon below as the prison slowly sealed itself again. The creature roared furiously from the darkness. Not defeated, contained. For now, Kael remained beside Lyra, as long as the hollow allowed. One hand tangled tightly with hers, neither willing to let go first. The ancient queens watched quietly. No one rushed them, perhaps because every woman standing there had once endured this same heartbreak. Kael stared at Lyra like he was trying to memorize every part of her. The shape of her mouth, the fire in her eyes, the softness hidden beneath all her strength. Lyra touched his face gently. His curse was gone now, completely. No black scales, no corruption, only the man beneath it all. The prince she loved, and somehow seeing him finally free made this hurt even worse. Kael leaned into her touch slightly. You saved me. Lyra smiled sadly. You saved me first. Because he had. Long before wings. Long before prophecy. Kael had seen worth in a frightened girl, everyone else viewed as political currency. He had protected her, when she never even knew his name. The hollow rumbled beneath them. Time was ending. The Skyfire Queens slowly stepped toward the center seal surrounding the abyss. Golden fire spiraled upward around their bodies. Waiting, Lyra's mother approached last. Illyria's eyes shimmered with tears she could no longer physically shed. You do not have to be afraid anymore, she whispered softly. Lyra looked toward Kael, and realized fear was no longer what hurt most. Love was. Kael saw the truth in her face instantly. He pulled her against him one final time. Not carefully. Desperately. Lyra buried herself against his chest, breathing him in like memory already. I don't know how to leave you, she admitted brokenly. Kael closed his eyes tightly. Then don't say goodbye. The words nearly destroyed what little strength she had left. The Dragon Prince lifted her chin gently. Say something else. Tears spilled down Lyra's face freely now. So she whispered the truth. Find me again. Kael kissed her slowly. Not with hunger this time. With reverence. The kind of kiss given to something precious enough to survive lifetimes for. The hollow glowed brighter around them. The seal was opening for her, calling her home. Kael finally pulled away first because he had to. Because if he didn't, he would never let her go. The prince pressed his forehead against hers one last time. Then quietly, I loved you from the moment I watched your carriage disappear into the snow. Lyra's breath shattered. All those years, all that distance, all that loneliness. And somehow he had carried her in silence through every one of them. Kael stepped backward slowly. The hardest thing he had ever done. Lyra's fingers slipped from his. The mate bond stretched painfully between them, like a thread refusing to break. Then the Skyfire Queens raised their hands together. Gold fire erupted across the abyss. The bond snapped. Pain exploded through both of them instantly. Kael dropped to one knee with a broken sound ripped from his chest, as the mate bond severed violently beneath the hollow's magic. Lyra cried out too, not because the love vanished, because it remained. Even without the bond, the silence afterward felt unbearable. Kael looked up slowly through tears, and despite the agony ripping through both their souls, he smiled at her. Small, devastated, beautiful. Go save our world, my queen. Lyra broke completely then, but she turned anyway, because loving him meant protecting the future he deserved to live in. The Skyfire Queens welcomed her into the seal. Gold fire wrapped around Lyra's body gently as she stepped toward the center of the abyss. The ancient runes awakened fully beneath her feet, while the hollow walls trembled around her. The first dragon roared one final time from the darkness below. Skyfire Queen. Lyra spread her blazing wings. "No," she answered softly. Then her eyes lifted toward the distant dawn, breaking above the mountains. "Not Queen." The fire around her intensified, brighter than the sun. "Guardian." And the hollow sealed. The explosion of gold light illuminated the continent. Every dragon alive felt it. Peace. The corruption vanished, like ash beneath rain. The undead dragons collapsed lifeless across the mountains. The frozen valleys thawed. And deep beneath the earth, the first dragon's roar faded into silence once more. Above the hollow, Kale stood alone beneath the dawn. Snow drifted softly around him now. The war was over. The kingdom survived. And none of it mattered. The dragon prince stared into the sealed abyss long after the light faded, as though waiting for her to return immediately, despite knowing better. The Beast King approached quietly from behind. For once, the northern ruler carried no arrogance, only respect. "She saved all of us." Kale never looked away from the hollow. "Yes." The Beast King hesitated briefly, then softly, "What will you do now?" Kale finally lifted his eyes toward the sunrise spreading across the mountains, and for the first time since childhood, the prince no longer looked cursed, only heartbroken. "I wait." Months passed, then years. The kingdoms changed after the fall of the hollow. The Ember Temple lost its absolute power, once the truth about the curse spread across dragonkind. Noble houses that once feared Skyfire blood now honored it openly. And every year, on the anniversary of the hollow's sealing, dragons across the continent lit gold fire lanterns beneath the night sky for the queens beneath the mountains. But none honored her more than Kale. The Dragon King never married, never allowed another bond, never removed the black and gold pendant missing from around his neck, because Lyra still carried it below the hollow. Stories spread across the kingdoms over time. Stories of a king who stood at the northern cliffs every winter dawn, waiting for someone only he believed would return. Most called it grief. Others called it devotion. Kyle called it faith. And then, many years later, on the coldest dawn of winter, the hollow pulsed once. Softly, Kale froze at the cliff edge. The mountains went silent. Then gold fire flickered beneath the ice below. Weak, small, but alive. The Dragon King's breath caught painfully, and somewhere deep beneath the world, a familiar voice whispered softly through the bond that should no longer exist. "Kyle." His knees nearly gave out. Then, slowly, for the first time in years, "Kyle Smile."